figured out at the end after we see where it goes. So Arthur is on the purification rundown, as our listeners know. He's today is exactly 2 weeks, 14 days, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, you're right. It is too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
He
haven't.
is incredibly like he's insane with dates. Like I don't get it. He will tell you exactly what date a song came out, etc. I don't know. They did something good on Straight
Hmm.
Wire.
An elephant's memory. Let's see. I was last in the
Yeah.
Arcturus sector in anyway.
Don't forget Circa.
Circa.
Circa this earth.
It's a real word and it can be used. So is supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's in the dictionary. Anyway, I'm just kidding. So you're on day 14, and we'd been talking about this, and Scientology Girl and I had been watching some of the Joe Rogan podcasts on YouTube over the weekend, and Joe is a big proponent for psychedelics, and there are quite a few people that have come to AOGP wanting services who have used psychedelics. Much to my surprise, I was raised as a Scientologist, and nobody ever even, well, I take that back. Somebody did offer me something when I worked at McDonald's once, but blue window pain, I think, is what it was called, and it was LSD. So my awareness on this, other than what people have done, I was just surprised the other day that you said mescaline was a psychedelic. I didn't know that.
Yes, a very strong one too.
Yeah. So Scientology Girl has a particular viewpoint. I have a particular viewpoint. Arthur has a particular viewpoint. I'm gonna. You guys clearly wanted to talk this out, so go.
I'll let Arthur start.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm not sure where to start. Um, how do we kick this off? Okay, all right. Well, let's go to. Okay, so you guys were watching Joe Rogan, and what sort of questions do you have around his promotion? Or we could even start with Scientology's point of view on psychedelics.
Well, Lisa looked like
L. Ron Hubbard's view.
she had something on deck. So and I'll throw in LRH stuff as to give
As we go.
that viewpoint as we go.
Yeah,
So,
I do want to know the Scientology one, but I also want to know, Arthur. Okay, let's get it out of the way. Big question: pro psychedelics or not?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. And I'll tell you the reason I say it's a hard question to answer, because with some of them, not all of them, but with some of them, they have potential, I believe, to help with certain things. Um, some of them don't, and it really depends on how you use them. So you can use alcohol appropriately, or you can abuse alcohol, and in turn, the alcohol will abuse you. And some, not all psychedelics, can be like that. Like psilocybin in mushrooms, for example, can be used in that way. So you don't have to go, high dose where you're seeing God to get something from it, in a sense. Whereas other substances, say DMT, dimethyltryptamine, you have no choice. Like, your full exterior the moment you consume it, whether it's through ayahuasca brew or whether you smoke it, you're completely disassociated, completely. And it's a very powerful psychedelic.
Right, but
So it's a hard question to answer,
okay.
because I've used a lot of these pre Scientology,
Mhm.
um, and I kind of see some similarities. The biggest thing, I think, is the unfortunate thing. Let's say somebody has psychedelics and then comes into Scientology, because of the intense disassociation and the intense exteriorization. I think it'd be I don't know if it would be impossible, but I think it'd be really hard for somebody to exteriorize naturally after going through an experience like that.
Put a pin in that, and I'll come back to that later because I have a great story for that. But continue.
Okay.
Pushing Mike away
Yeah.
from self.
Yep. But there is a dark side that people don't discuss either, and that's body thetans. Because when you're completely disassociated, you're no longer in control, and that opens doors everywhere
Right.
on your body. Yeah,
Second pin.
yeah.
So
Is that as in to remove what was just said, or to
No,
discuss
no,
later?
I'm going to comment on it, but I don't want to. I don't want to interject in the communication line that you guys have, and then you forget what you're going to say. So go ahead.
Okay, sure. Okay.
So I guess my question really is how do you know that it is a spiritual event versus like just something that you're creating? Because it is a
So if I
psychedelic.
was, it is a psychedelic, and depending on what you take. So from my end, I've had DMT, I've had mescaline, um, and mushrooms as well, psilocybin, and they're all very different in their way.
Okay.
But they're also very strong hallucinogenics where I've had some experiences on DMT where it's real. It's like incredibly real. And the funny thing is, like, if you talk to people that have had high dose experiences with psychedelics, there's a language they understand because now they know. Whereas for me to try and explain it, it's almost impossible. And that's I think that's the hook for psychedelics as well, because I could go black and blue telling you what my experiences were, but unless you've experienced it yourself, there's not much to talk about in a sense.
Are
And that's what makes them
psychedelics
really unique.
are psychedelics
Yeah.
addictive?
No. However, depends on the person taking them, because there are people that do rely on them as well.
Mm.
Because the disassociation factor is far greater than getting drunk. It's far greater than so many other substances.
And what
It's like you're in the astral world, so to speak.
Right. And then is there a major like come down, like for example, a hangover for alcohol?
It does play a toll on the body, of course, because the body's just so consumed. Um, but some of them not so much. Like, so say with DMT, for example, um, DMT comes and goes, and it's not a long lasting psychedelic. You know, its peak is like 15 to 20 minutes in and out, and then once you've come out of it, you're sober. You've got a little bit of a buzz about you, but you can function properly and drive a car, go back to work, do whatever you got to do.
Right.
Um, Whereas other ones, the come down can be really slow. So mescaline can be really heavy on the body, and it might take you a day or two to sort of normalize. But even then, after taking something like that, you don't normalize 100%.
Okay. What did you want to say?
Yep.
Well, my first question: why? Why did you? And this isn't a condemnatory why. This is what
Yep.
was your goal, your purpose, your intent in doing this? Now I have a supposition as to why, knowing you as I do as a friend.
Sure.
But what say ye?
Well, I'm growing up, I've always been a bit of an explorer, and I've always been fascinated with magic, with the mysteries of this world. I ask a lot of questions. And then when I heard about psychedelics,
Mhm.
it was on my list. I'm just like, wow, maybe I could go really deep. You hear about people having these amazing experiences and spiritual experiences more so. And there is an element of that in them. Um, and so for me, being an avid Earth explorer, it was on my bucket list. And so I did. Really that simple. Just to see
What would
how far
happen,
my mind can go. Yeah. What
in
would
other
I
words?
learn? What would I take from it? Could it help me heal in a
Mhm.
sense?
Did you learn anything?
Um, yes, heaps. Um,
Would you
And
care to extrapolate on that?
yeah, of course, of course. So a lot of religious experiences for me, especially, um, it just like it all made sense. It was really, really interesting, and I was actually quite surprised at, for me personally, I can't speak for other people, but for me personally, the amount of religious content I found in it. It was like, Moses was a real thing, a real being. You know, a few experiences where just the way the earth comes alive and how nature responds when you're in that state can be really quite incredible as well. You can hear trees talking, the animals are really responsive. It's a really interesting place to be a part of. Um, but the downside to that is it makes it really hard for you after experiencing something like that to go back into society and be normal ever again, because you can't be. It's really difficult to be a part of society after such an experience.
wow. Okay. So I guess I'm curious, aside from that, are there any sort of like other ways that it has like helped your life and you know uh, made you consider yourself a more spiritual person?
It's probably, now that I think about it, um, it could actually be those experiences that makes me have an issue with the word spirituality.
Mm,
Because I don't know if I'd call them spiritual experiences, but at the same time, I could. And we've got to consider, it was substance that got me there. It wasn't my efforts to get me there. You take the substance and bang, you're there.
right.
You know what I mean? There's no effort required at all.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to spend time meditating to get to a Kundalini state, for example,
Mm-hmm.
um, then it would come with its own experience. Whereas the psychedelics just take you there straight away and you're completely conscious. You know what I mean? Your body goes, you completely remove yourself from your body and you're completely conscious of it 100%. Your mind is still intact, which is what makes it really unique.
So, did you get out of it what you thought you would get out of it?
No, no. People will go in with an expectation
Mhm.
and it'll give you whatever it gives you, because not all experiences are pleasant. We can say that some of them
Right.
can be really dark and terrifying as well.
Yeah. So, do you have any other questions for him before I go to pins?
You can go. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, and this is just this is just another um viewpoint. Is you had mentioned and I'm going to approach this from the viewpoint of not necessarily I'm going to approach it from the viewpoint of the milestone one lectures back in 51, 52, as far as entities that share your space. I'm going to leave it at that. Okay.
Okay.
And
Yep.
these and this way I'm not necessarily and we did a whole podcast on full disclosure almost a year ago, that the information is out there and all you have to do is Google it, and it takes seconds, and there's nothing we can do about that, and it's out there, and there are those who are aware of it, and there are those who don't. But at the end of the day, what you're seeing with drugs, the response that you're seeing with drugs, it would appear to somebody on the lower end of the bridge that you put a quarter into the machine, a drug into the body, and out comes a result. You get a soda pop. Back in the 70s, you could get one for a quarter, early 70s. Now it's ridiculously expensive. But anyway, so when you put that drug in, you get a desired, or like what you just said, a not desired result. Now, there's a reason for this. A lot of the effects that drugs have aren't necessarily anything that is caused by the drug other than restimulation to these other spiritual beings that are associated, attached, for lack of a better word, to you. And he talks about this on the Milestone 1 lectures. And this is the earliest data that LRH contacted regarding what would later come up to be on the OT levels on OT3 and new OT4 through 7, and even Excalibur if you go outside of LRH's bridge once you finish it. So these drugs, the effects that these drugs have, aren't just having an effect on you, they're having an effect on them. And that is the effect, that is the gross, the aggregate effect that you see when you take drugs. And if you were to, and I'm just saying, if we just cut to the chase and go to the end, and if you were to eliminate these entities that get affected by this, you would have a much lesser effect by said drug or drugs. And this is part of the drug experience that you are experiencing. It's not your experience, but they are connected to you. Sometimes they're tied to your railroad train track as the bad guy, and they're tying themselves to you. And when you drink a glass of water and go, they go, oh yeah, that's great, because they're experiencing the same thing you are. Okay, but their experiences are shared with you as much as your experiences are shared with them. You know what they know what you know. So he says BTs and clusters are affected by drugs. They mock up the biochemistry, and they mock up the drug and drug incidents. Drug taking in this lifetime restimulates earlier incidents of drug taking on the track. When the case is viewed as a composite of these particular entities, you will see that drug taking in this lifetime causes a highly multiple restimulation. A drug incident can be a cluster or grouping of these making an incident. When a person, and I have to back up here, taking drugs is an engram. It is a Dianetic engram. It's an engramic experience. Earlier drug cultures on the track prior to Earth were much worse than this drug culture, and that is something that needs to be put in big capital letters. In some cultures, the psychiatrist, or what would be considered from Earth terms, the psychiatrist, priest, and medical personnel, were all one and the same person, sort of like the tribe witch doctor, depending on where you were in the universe, and frequently used drugs. Some implanters use drugs either as part of the implant incident or to keep a population enslaved thereafter. You see this here on Earth right freaking now at this very moment. COVID was one of these. Okay, I'm not kidding around here. When these entities who have whole track drug incidents are restimulated by this lifetime drug incident, i.e. psychedelics, there's a multiple restimulation, and if severe enough, can form a new clustering of these because it's a Dianetic engram. It groups them together, composed of single and multiple individuals thrown into restimulation by the drug. Now, this is where we get into the purif. The residual drug remaining in the body tends to keep them in restimulation. This is why you do a purif. And they, by mocking it up, tend to hold on to the drug and keep the drug pictures in restimulation. So this is how you get affected by something down the road, and it would hold down if you were to get auditing, or might hold you down in some area in life. There are two factors regarding drugs. There is the factor of residual drugs in the body, one, and two, there are entities who are stuck in whole track drug incidents, which they are mocking up. These two factors are interactive. The residual drug deposit in the body causes a drug effect and tends to keep the entities in restimulation. It is this residual drug deposit that is gotten rid of by sweat out, he says, on the purification rundown. These entities who are stuck in these whole track drug incidents continue to mock it up. They actually mock up the drug as well as the incident. This can give the appearance that the drug is in the body. After all, a thetan can create matter, energy, space, and time. And because they are mocking up the drug and because they are stuck in it totally, you can get the appearance that there is a residual drug remaining in the body. This is where you get mental mass with somebody that's taken a lot of drugs, and you look at them and they almost appear cloudy like Pigpen in a Peanuts cartoon.
Yes, yes.
So, and there's more on this. He says the purification rundown will handle a lot of this by getting rid of the residual drugs in the body. And this in itself not only improves a person physically, but also will allow much of the entity's pictures to drop out of restimulation, or at least to drop out of chronic restimulation. And there's
so TLDR, it's bad.
Yeah. TLDR, it's bad because what happens is just like anything else. If you had a military guy who was in a war zone and he came back to a noisy downtown area where there's lots of constructions and cars honking and stuff like that, he very well would be restimulated to a war zone that he was in.
Even
yeah.
children.
Yes.
I know this is extra, but even kids who have grown up with, loud parents and shouting, screaming, that sort of thing, later on in life, it can develop I guess it's sort of like a sensory issue to loud noises and stuff, where it triggers them all over again.
Yeah, and it's a Dianetic lock on long chain, and this is why these particular drugs have a lot of the power that they do beyond because I mean, let's just face it, there are different types of poisons that don't kill you, much like sugar is a poison. It tastes good, but the effect that it has on you, it's considered a poison by in chemistry circles to the body. Right. So you get a desired effect on the body because of what it does to a body. So psychedelics do the same thing, but the experiences that one has, and this goes to the other pin you mentioned, interiorization, makes it harder for a person to exteriorize. Yes, it does. Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah. Because what the drug, when a person takes a drug, let's say you get a tooth removed or something like that, and you get a local anesthetic, that feeling that you have, that you feel your jaw is a foot out from where your head is actually part of the OT case, avoiding it because they don't want to be in restimulation, but they're pushing away from the body, because these things paint your body all over the place. And they even create a shell around the body. It's an interesting phenomenon. So when you take a psychedelic, you are really, really keying the case out. And this is why you get the awareness of trees and all this stuff, because you're keying out the case. That's why people take drugs. That's why drugs are given. That's why the pharmaceutical companies make these things, is they're like, well, it does this. Okay, we can make billions off of this. Yep. It does this, but from a nurse standpoint, they don't have a freaking clue. They don't have a clue that what all they're doing is they're keying out the being for a certain period of time in a particular area. And this includes the OT case that's causing a particular body problem. But the thing is once it keys out, it has to key back in, and then the person cannot exteriorize. Now, what is the psychedelic where you can go down to the South African rainforest and you can do the whole experience? I forget. Ayahuasca. Rogan's big on ayahuasca.
Yep. A lot of people are.
Yeah. And I recently, just this time around to remind me, but I've had several times where I've had to do an exteriorization rundown on somebody who's done ayahuasca, because it restimulates a birth or a death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that is considered to be out interiorization, out exteriorization. So it restimulates a long, long line of these going ins and coming outs of a body, because you throw up. I mean, when you take this stuff, the body is trying to purge it out because it is a poison. And the side effects that it creates are both your side effects physically, I think of them on the minor, and major is these other entities that are in your space. And
Mm-hmm.
that causes a huge restimulation, not only of your own, but of theirs, because there's an interiorization, exteriorization, a couple different handlings for these guys in your space, besides your own interiorization, exteriorization. So you're compounding a birth and a death times tens or hundreds of thousands that are pulling in mental mass. And this throws the tone arm up into the 5-6 range. Literally, it can't get much
Mm-hmm.
higher on a theta meter or on a church e-meter. And so you can't audit the guy, because he can't key anything out, because this is keyed in so hard. That's the downside of it. And so you have to handle that restimulation, and you can go from here on it as to what you experience. I'd be very interested to hear this, if you do have information on what it was
Yep.
that you experienced. You know, I know Joe Rogan's mentioned these
During the
entities that he's
curative,
seen.
or
No, as far as, being on
just in
psychedelics,
general?
seeing these otherworldly beings and them talking to him and all
Sure,
this
sure,
stuff.
sure, sure,
I
sure.
whether it's false or it's real, I'm interested in it, because I think that's what's going on, is you're so keyed out of your head, so to speak, that you're able to directly function around, bypassing the case in order to either communicate with your own entities or entities that are just in the vicinity. So
Okay.
what experiences do you have on that?
Well, before I go into some experiences, um, like the origination of these substances was always used as a medicine rather than an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a lot of cultures, it would help a shaman enter the spirit world to remove spirits from someone. So if somebody if so the shaman would take it, as well as the person he's trying to heal, because in that space then he could help remove the devils, playing havoc on people's bodies, disease or whatever it might be for the person. um, so there is a side to it where, used in a particular way, is the way it always was. But then, like Westerners, once we get our hands on things, it's just like, man, let's see how off our face we can get. And, you know, it replaces alcohol, it replaces marijuana, it replaces all these other sort of weekend activities. Somebody gets their hands on LSD, and it's like, let's go to a concert, and all the lasers and all that kind of stuff creates an extra experience on top of, the noise, the music, people, so on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, a traditional use of some of these substances. And Hamilton's pharmacopoeia, and one of his episodes in particular, with a plant called Salvia divinorum, which is also a really strong hallucinogenic, and it's a plant. And in that episode, it showed a really beautiful contrast of how the plant's used traditionally, but also how it's used in the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as far as I'm aware, according to the series, so the active ingredient in salvia can be extracted. And so what people do is, instead of having just the plant dry leaf matter as it is, they actually extract the active alkaloid out of it and then soak it, so you can get like 10 times the effect or 20 times the dose in the same amount. And what was really beautiful about that particular episode was, it showed what it was like in the Western world, where they're like, oh, I've had like 40 times the dose and extremely strong psychedelic as well. But then when it was used traditionally, they were very resistant to working with him because of the actual use of these plants. It wasn't just something everybody did or anybody did. And I think this is the danger zone with these plants being promoted the way they are. Because in a culture belief system, like outside of Scientology, outside of the Western world, they actually have use for these plants in a very specific controlled environment. Whereas now, of course, because it's been so popularized, all these poverty countries are able to monetize on it as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So they can make the ayahuasca and sell it on the streets, and Westerners will buy it by the truckload full.
Yeah.
Because of the amazing healing qualities and this and that. But then when they take it in such a way, they're opening the door to all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All sorts of stuff. I know people that have, used it hundreds of times and they're still got the same issues. You know what I mean? They've they rely on these substances like people rely on antidepressants. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's a similar trap.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and it's a if your body is a chemical production engine. If it wasn't, it wouldn't
yep.
it wouldn't be alive. And so therein lies the rub of you can't necessarily escape the effects of drugs when you're living in a carbon oxygen engine that constantly is producing one drug or another in order to keep the body rolling. And then
Yes.
on top of that, you have to have plants and or animals in order to feed you along. So now you're dealing with other other organisms that do the same thing, and then down that particular line you go. It's unavoidable to some degree, and what we're talking about are very, very particular manifestations of chemical compounds that are introduced into the body that cause an effect. And that's the point of my statement is it's causing an
Yes.
effect, and it isn't.
Yes.
I think that the distinction should be made that they're causing an effect, uh, uh, like say through Scientology and Dianetics processing would be, and this is my opinion, is the positive way to get those effects. Or you can choke the living daylights out of somebody and give them a near death experience, and they can go, I had a near death
Yes.
experience, and this is what I saw. That to
Well,
me,
Wim Hof promotes that.
yeah,
He promotes that
yeah,
using your breath to get a similar DMT experience,
yeah,
completely natural, and probably beneficial as well. Because
yeah.
the amount of oxygen it introduces into the body, as opposed to restricting oxygen in the body, it does the complete opposite, and you still get a very similar effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the body is like
It's not
Ellery
the
says,
same, but similar.
right, right. It's a very fragile
Yep.
thing. It requires a very narrow temperature band. It can, if you get into the 50s, it's cold, and if you get into the mid to upper 80s, it's too hot. Has to have a certain
Mm-hmm.
barometric pressure. I mean, it's a very, very
Mm-hmm.
fragile thing compared to, say, just a spiritual being or a thetan. And so therein lies the ways that you can push it in certain directions, either naturally, like you were saying, Wim Hof does, or with psychedelics to get particular results, or
Yep.
you can Scientologically, you can free up the being from these masses that are caused by being in a body, taking drugs, that sort of thing.
So I've just been sitting listening to both viewpoints, and it's good that we have a very Scientological viewpoint, and then obviously we have firsthand, excuse me, experience from Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
I do have an opinion on this stuff.
Yeah, I was. That's why I kept looking over at you. Go
I
ahead.
was just
See
soaking
it.
it all
I
in.
I can see it.
Yeah, so okay. Obviously, my viewpoint is going to be sort of probably mixed pseudoscience with Scientology, with whatever, because I obviously have studied a lot of the stuff. So if I'm looking at sort of like a metaphysical viewpoint, I would say that I agree with the key out thing. I agree with the cause and effect thing. And I do want to touch on that a bit more. So like within this physical universe, right? If there's anything that I've learned in my 35 years, I'm turning 35 in this month actually. If there's anything I've learned, it's that this universe is so there isn't a cause without an effect. It's a relationship, and the greater the cause, the greater the effect. So, if you have, now I know there's the butterfly effect and all of that, but and chaos theory, but in terms of this, like if you have to go and drink, for example, 3 glasses of wine the previous night, you're going to wake up with a little hangover. Whereas if you do heroin for a week or a month, getting off it is going to give you excruciating pain. So there's always this positive effect, or something that seems positive, and then there's this negative, right? So I guess my question with this whole thing, with taking psychedelics, is okay. You're getting a supposed spiritual experience just from taking a plant, right? Uh, I
Yep.
mean, some people have spent a lot of time and effort and money and all of that trying to reach these states of awareness. I mean, the monks, they sacrifice so much just to be able to
That's
do
right.
that, because obviously, they realize the trap that the game is or whatever.
That's also the only as
Mhm.
good as they've got, because they didn't have, well, let's say, the Scientology
Yeah.
technology. This was their vehicle to do these states.
Yeah. So I guess I'm sort of looking at it maybe how Jordan did with the Cain and Abel thing that he said,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, so what gives them the right? Yeah, not the right really. What makes it so like okay for people to just go out and do a drug and then have this big revelation or whatever? It's not just luck or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if I'm explaining myself properly, but what I'm saying is that I
I get where you're
personally,
coming from.
yeah, I personally don't
Yep.
think it's possible. I think that in order to reach those states of awareness, there has to be immense sacrifice. And that sacrifice extends further than just going and doing, something that's going to maybe give you like a throw up session or something like that. So I guess in my
All
opinion,
right.
it's not you're not able to achieve that. Now maybe okay, you do get keyed out, but there's going to be a negative consequence to that. And I think that's gonna
Yes.
probably, well, I mean, like John says, you can't even audit people if they've done that. And I think a lot of people need to consider that as something that's really key here, because what essentially you're doing when you're taking psychedelics, right? You're taking it, well, unless you just want to have fun or whatever, but if you're taking it for a spiritual experience, what you're saying is, I want to do this in order to gain awareness. Now, I understand that the immediate effect
Yes.
might come across as more awareness because of the key out, but long term, like if because obviously, whether it's meditation or auditing, whatever, the goal is to bring more and more and more and more and more awareness, right? So it's like, can you really achieve that kind of awareness? Is it the same thing as when you do a psychedelic? So therefore, is it actually spiritual?
Can I say something along those lines,
Yeah.
Arthur? Do you mind? 'Cause I
Yep.
can
I've just
I can feel you
muted
got
myself
something
because
on.
I'm making a cuppa. Yep.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no,
that you
I'm
might
listening.
have something on deck, but I'm gonna go back to and I like to use this analog mainly because he's a drummer, but Dave Grohl, the drummer for Nirvana and Foo Fighters, or the lead guy in Foo Fighters, back in his documentary about well, it's about music and how digital was changing everything. He said, "Look, we got all these tools to make all this music and everything, and quantify beats and um, auto-tuned voices and all this stuff. And he says, has it made music any better? Is music any better? Is there more good, great music out there than there was before? No. If you were to ask, and granted, that's a relative thing depending on the generation you're in. Somebody who's into EDM, somebody's who's into EDM might say there's more great music out there than ever before. But if you talk to somebody from my generation, rock is dead. Okay, so granted, things always change, but
Rock's not dead. It's still there, John. It's still there.
It's still there.
And
Hold
just
on,
so
it's
you know,
still there.
shout out
People
to
still make
Tiesto.
it.
Right. So
How dare you?
the analog here is if people are improving their awareness and they're saying, and how everybody should do this and it changed their life and all this stuff. Why isn't the world any better? Now, I'm going to take the other side of that, and somebody could say to me, well, if Scientology or independent Scientology is so great, why isn't the world better? Okay, so I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here.
Yeah.
But I am trying to say,
I think you just blew your point, to be honest.
well, I'm just trying to say is that
I get where you're coming from.
Yeah,
because there is a dark side about this stuff that does not get discussed, right? And then the way I look at it as well, the moment a medical association or a government organization tries to get their gritty little fingers in it as well, to me that says this is bad.
Yeah,
this is really bad.
Yeah, because the drug culture was LRH's biggest enemy. Was his biggest enemy, because as Scientology was improving and getting better, the drug culture in the 60s was taking off, and probably the launch point was the year I was born. It's actually the month I was born, June 1968. And it's just gone on from there. But instead of individuals doing it themselves with LSD and pot, for example, then it went into the hands of big corporations and big pharma and that type of a thing. And so,
Yes.
and it comes down to an individual level. It doesn't come to an organizational level. Is if this is so good for people and they're having these experiences, why aren't they becoming powerhouses and becoming the Jay-Z's of modern culture, and getting their hands in every kind of business and, making all kinds of money, or the other side of that? Why, who's somebody that has done something for humanity on this generation's, I want to be that guy. I want to be an NBA star. I want to be Eminem, or I want to be, sorry, Matt. These people, how come it hasn't done anything for anybody? Now I'm gonna go back to this, and I'm not saying anything pro or against the church here, but I'm just saying somebody like Tom Cruise, somebody like John Travolta, somebody like Dr. Eric Berg. Okay. All these three guys, they're still in the church.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them bad people.
Mm-mm.
These are people that are working in the direction of creativity, artistry, and the better good. But Joe Rogan's got over 2,000 podcasts, and yeah, he's really into psychedelics, and he reaches millions of people every day with his podcast. So I'm not trying to be judgmental
here. He credits his success, some of it at least partly, to that.
And I think that he does. So I can't say that there's absolutely no good in this, but I think it's a point worth talking about.
And that is a good point. There's a really cool one that he does with Mike Tyson. And I really like Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
I just really like him.
He is a can-do guy.
He's an incredible human being. So he had a really strong DMT experience that they extracted from a frog, and they call it 5-MeO DMT, which is like the duck's guts for DMT. But he only had it once, right? He only had it once.
Yeah.
And once. Yeah, he didn't have it every weekend. He didn't have it every so often. He only experienced it once.
Mm-hmm.
And that
That
one
was all he needed.
experience, exactly, it was enough to wake him up in a sense. Because I mean, these substances are so profoundly awe-inspiring. Um, it's so hard to explain. It's like seeing fireworks for the very first time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like seeing. I'm doing my best to try and relate it. Um, it could even be as intense as the first horrific thing you saw. You know, just that impact it puts on you
Yeah.
is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. But that's the hook of it as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even in the occult world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if one was to um, make a pact with a devil
Mm-hmm.
for knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
right? The devil would give them everything they want, but
Right.
it would want something in return.
Right.
Yeah.
Always, always want
That's
something
that
in
cause and
return. You
effect
know?
thing again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, here's an interesting
Yeah.
question. Now, since we're in this realm,
Yep.
what was
Yep.
the Scientology girl?
Mm-hmm.
What is? I'm not gonna say what was because it is because I'm restimulating it. I'm causing an effect to get this answered. That's what interrogatives are. That's how auditing works. What was the most profound spiritual thing since you have not done psychedelics? What's the most profound thing you've
Mm.
experienced in your life? I don't care, I don't care whether it's Scientology or whatever. What was it?
Okay. Well, um, there was this one time. Now, obviously, being in the physical universe, we're used to pleasure sensations. So whether it's your morning cup of coffee or a little sweet treat or a little quick ciggy or there's all these different things. There's sensation. Even this morning, I'm sitting here and I had my hot water bottle,
Because it's
near
cold here
me
in the
because it's
morning.
cold and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that feels so good. So there's always sensation. And if there isn't sensation, our minds are going to try to create sensation, either by thinking negatively or positively. Most of us think negatively. It is what it is. But um, I had, I was like having some sort of like very bad mental health day. And um, I was in that point in time, I was reading The Power of Now. And so I was like, I just reached a point where I wasn't reading it on the day, but I'd read it like the night before or something, and I'd remembered things that it said. And I just reached a point that day where I was just like, enough. I'm done. I'm tapping out. I'm tapping out of my thoughts. I'm tapping out of my problems. I'm tired of dealing with so much stuff. And for a brief moment, I don't really know how long it was, but I was sitting outside in the sun. Now, one could argue that's also,
Vitamin D.
some sort of pleasure
Yeah.
sensation, the
Yeah.
heat on your body or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was sitting outside, and there was just nothing.
Right. It can be said the recommended daily dosage of vitamin D by the FDA is a minute and 8 seconds. So
Okay.
you got your daily dosage of vitamin D.
But
I'm being snarky to the FDA on that.
yeah, but I was just sitting outside, and there was just nothing. There's no thoughts, no judgment. Oh, the sky looks beautiful, or oh, that snail looks in pain, or there was nothing. It was just quiet. And I found
Mm.
there was just so much peace in that without any, like it wasn't even really about the sun. I was just sitting.
Right. Just being there.
Yeah. And I was being
Mm-hmm.
comfortable, I guess, because there wasn't any thoughts, there wasn't nothing. And that is probably the most profound experience I've had
This lifetime.
this lifetime that I would consider deeply spiritual. And I say it's spiritual because I didn't have any of the physical universe input. Like I wasn't on the receiving. Like I wasn't trying to receive stimulation or pleasure or anything like that. It was purely just me and myself and the quiet. And yeah. That was it.
So that was spiritual, or
Yep.
was that physical, or was it both?
No, I feel like it was a spiritual thing because it wasn't any stimulus thing.
Okay.
You know, one could say, like, there were times when I used to meditate before, and I used to think that was being spiritual because I used to have my headphones on and I used to visualize things, and I had, you know, this powerful like aura type music on in the background with the headphones, and I'd reach these higher states, but those were probably just, you know, euphoria from just feeling good because of, you know,
Well,
whatever.
music keys you out. That's
Right.
why people listen to it. You don't listen to music to get keyed in and feel
Right.
bad, unless, of course, the beautiful sadness of it all, and you're listening to something that does that for you. I mean, that's your choice.
Right.
But
So I think to summarize my experience, what I view as spiritual is not how I used to view it. I used to view spirituality the same way you would view um, different sensations. Like there's going to be this eye-opening revelation, and the sky is going to be more beautiful, and you know you're going to feel euphoric, and it's not really that. That is still physical universe stuff, because look, you can get dopamine from all these different places, and you know that is still physical universe. So the for me, it's the opposite end. It's, I believe, you find spirituality by actually removing yourself from those things. Now, okay, it obviously is reminiscent of, you know, Buddhism or whatever, because you're saying no to pleasure and you're welcoming suffering. But it's more than that, because there is a middle line, obviously. You know, you have to have gray areas, or else you're just going to go off and try to be whatever, and then neglect your responsibilities and stuff. And that actually causes suffering. So you don't want to do that. But to summarize, I think my version of spirituality is just knowing yourself. And I'm not, like I said in the previous podcast, I'm not talking about the self that is Lisa, or the self that is,
no
you know,
identity.
was a daughter or anything, the identity, the valence, right? It's something more profound than that. It's this consciousness that you are. All you are is something. Well, I don't want to say that, but when I experience it, it's all I am is just the experiencer. And even the thoughts that I have is not me. And once I can disassociate from the thoughts, the identity, and all of that stuff, I believe what's left, who I am, spiritual being. Because L. Ron Hubbard didn't say, a Thetan can this, a Thetan can that, you know, outside of a body. He said that they're able to perceive and they're able to postulate, right? I'm not sure about the rest, but those are the two that I remember.
And perceive, postulate, and consider.
Right. Yes. So, you know, all those other things, the judgment and the this and the that or whatever, those are all physical universe things. So when you remove yourself from those things, that's what you're left with, is just this consciousness. And if you know that
Static.
consciousness, and if you're aware of it, there's just, it's abundant. There's infinite peace there. So the things that you crave, that you long for, oh, I wish I had a better car, right? People who have found this, and I'm not I'm speaking from a limited experience. I'm not speaking from, you know, I've reached enlightenment. No. But people who have experienced this, where they no longer long for this stuff, they no longer have this egocentric mind controlling them. I must have this, because if I have this, then that means I have status, and if I have status, people will like me, you know, all of that stuff. Once you let go of all of that, that is what you're left with. And I believe that is essentially spirituality. It's being here and being comfortable regardless of the situation.
From a physical standpoint, your surroundings.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm gonna ask Arthur the same thing. Arthur, what has been your most spiritual, and I'm not using a Scientology term, just like I did with Scientology Girl. What has been your most spiritual experience this lifetime? And then I'll give mine, and we'll have sort of three.
I think I've had a
want to come
lot.
back and say something about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once he's done, then we'll do that.
Yep. I think through my lifetime, I've had a lot, because that's been something, like I said, for me personally, as a young child, it's always been part of my world in a sense. You know, I could easily disassociate as or exteriorize as a child. I'd do it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Even yeah, all the time. It was just something I could do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even now, and I don't know if I'm correct in what I'm about to say, but I will soon find out. But I think because it was always a natural part of me, and I have to say, Scientology, just the word exteriorization meant so much more than lucid dreaming or astral projection or anything like that. I don't think you could get more appropriate than the word exteriorization, literally becoming exterior to your body.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes the most perfect
It's the
sense
best
compared to
descriptor.
when I first heard it. I'm like, that's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It explains it perfectly. And then it also made me realize how often I do go exterior, even not in not in a almost sleep state or not in a meditative state. It actually it actually made me realize, oh, I can go exterior anytime I want. I can go exterior now if I want to.
Right. So
Um,
was there a particular time, one particular time that was the most spiritual, either in the physical universe, because Lisa uh, described it from more the spiritual side than the physical universe side.
okay,
Other than when the
okay.
time place was that it occurred, but it was more spiritual for her. So, what was your most spiritual event? Was this in your childhood?
Throughout my life, there was a period, like even to today, I still have a lot of these experiences. But to me, it's so normalized now. I don't see it as spiritual. I see it as human behavior, human experience. I see it as normal, you know, and I'm quite astounded that as a human race, we find these things abnormal or people need to have special ability to be us. And I think the disassociation with who we really are is really disgusting, I think is the word I'd use.
Mhm.
Because even after having psychedelic experiences, I'm really grateful that pre those experiences, I have the knowledge of something else. That doesn't mean, though, that my experiences are not going to get in the way of future potentials because they will. Now that I've seen them, I can't unsee them. Now that I've felt them, I can't unfeel them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me specifically, and only personally, um, while you were talking, Lisa, I've had so many moments pre psychedelics, just randomly sitting outside on a porch having a cigarette, and then everything all of a sudden just comes alive. And I'm at such peace. The colors crisp up, the air is clean, and I'm so aware of my presence. I'm, I don't know, I can only explain clear. That's
So
the only word I can use to say it.
so was that
Just
spiritual
completely
physically or
clear.
spiritual spiritually?
Both, both. It was like they both fell into alignment, but not for long. Yeah, not for long. Because the moment a thought comes in, bang, it's gone. You know, oh, I've got to go do work or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with that
She's got a big
clarity,
smile on her face over here.
but with that clarity, and the cool thing I think for me as well is like the concept of clear is real to me.
Mm-hmm.
However, maintaining that clear, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole different story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tough to do, and it's tough to do in a body with the body as a resistor. Lisa, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I wanted to circle back on what I actually the reason why I feel like having external pleasures and all of that actually pulls you further away.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was younger, I used to have these experiences without drugs, nothing, just it would just be like at random of they would sort of be almost euphoric, where, you know, I'd be outside, maybe I'd be standing near a tree, or, you know, nature got me there pretty easily, right? So I'm not really sure on that relationship. However, what I have seen is that when I have put my ethics in, I've become more aware. And when I say put my ethics, I mean like uh well, general ethics, but also, like, for example, I'm personally not supposed to have dairy, because if I have dairy, I'm lactose intolerant, right? So all of these things that we do, that we take, that we consume or whatever, they can have a negative effect. I think it was Barbara O'Neill that said
I
dairy
love that
actually,
woman.
yeah, me too. She said that dairy has a negative effect on your nose, so your nostril becomes clogged, etc., etc. So that got me thinking, um if we have to, like, if there are things that are basically blocking us from certain senses. Look, LRH said that there's more than 5 senses. There's tons of senses, basically, right? And I feel like the senses are key to our awareness as well. Now, when we're constantly flooding those senses with things, we actually lose the ability to be aware, because we've got so many different things, stimulus responses and stuff, right? Um, and for example, like sugar, when I stop when I stop eating sugar and drinking it in my coffee and all of that, like, I feel a difference. I actually experience more of those things that I had when I was a kid, where I can just experience more. I have always known I had a very sensitive body. When I say sensitive, I mean sensitive. So I'm able to perceive things and sense things. And obviously this goes into, you know, a little bit of the paranormal realm, technically. But yeah, I could always sense more. So my thing is that when you are putting all these things inside your body, and using all these external things and creating distractions or whatever, you stop feeling. Your sensations are sort of they're numbed out. I mean, even in the Tao, it says, you know, taste, strong tastes dull the taste sensations, and sound numbs the
Yes.
hearing, or whatever. So if you take that, and I've literally seen it for myself, when I stop doing these things that I'm not supposed to be doing. And even cigarettes, like, I tell you, I have had a difficult time with nicotine. I'm even now contemplating on going and getting myself a vape, and I've been like a month or so over it. So, like, I keep going back. But I tell you, that first drag of that first cigarette is absolute bliss. But you know what? After that, I get palpitations, I get blood pressure issues. It just feels awful. So my point is that there's always that negative effect. Whereas if you remove these things, if you actually try and not have them as much, that leads you to be more aware. And I think it's got to do with the whole mass thing. But yeah, I suppose that's a topic for another podcast.
So
Okay.
Yeah,
I get
Well,
where you're coming from. Go ahead.
I guess.
can I just take a step back?
Okay.
So, other spiritual experiences I've had, because like I said, I've always been an explorer. So, I've had some beautiful spiritual moments playing in my band where we're all just in perfect unison, and the four of us are working as one.
Mm-hmm.
I've had other beautiful experiences using just voice. Like there was a many years ago. I remember there was an occasion. There was probably about 10 of us standing in a circle and just using our voices.
Mm-hmm.
And then something happened when everybody just came together as one, and it was just like this incredible powerball of everybody's vulnerabilities just all sharing the same space, and the unity amongst fellow humans was just mind blowing.
Yeah, it's
I
like
can't
being
even
an
express how
RC.
Yeah.
beautiful it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's
is. It's an ARC, KRC kind of
okay,
thing.
full ARC all the way, or
Yeah.
plus some, on
Yeah.
steroids.
Yeah. And
um,
go ahead.
yep. And then there was a period where I went deep into meditation. Um, and I did a lot of the guided meditations. And again, because of me being me, as I started to explore entities and those kinds of things, I stopped listening to the guided meditations because I found them really dangerous. Because you're creating stuff in the mind space that will
Yeah, it's sort of
become
like
real in
creative
your world to
processing
some degree.
in Scientology. Then
You're
that's why,
mocking up your own.
yeah, and
Yes.
that's
What?
why LRH stepped away from creative processing because it left mental debris, which
I
is
don't
similar.
understand that. And I need both of you to elaborate because I have used
Well,
guided
so,
meditation, but
Artie, I'll let you take that one.
okay. All right. So there's two different kinds of guided meditations. One is guiding you on how to breathe, how to put yourself into, just a relaxed state. So you can become so relaxed that you do get to that oneness through meditation. Then the other kind of meditation is, you're walking down a golden path, up to the castle and there's unicorns flying
yeah,
around and,
visualization basically.
just visualization. And that visualization can be really dangerous.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm going
don't
to
do
put a
that.
slight religious, yeah, and that stuff is, I believe personally, is really, really bad
It
for
can even
one,
be a form of
because,
hypnotism, really.
and a lot of it is, because I've studied hypnosis as well, and a lot of it is hypnosis, and a lot of these guided meditations are not very dissimilar.
Mm,
They're very similar. Um, but also, you're creating things inside of you, and you hope that when you open your eyes, you're going to still have this same fantasy world in the living world. It
right.
creates a different kind of disassociation.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to start looking at people really shittily, because it's like, I want my unicorn and castle back, when really I've got a boss telling me to do something I don't like. You know
Mm,
what I mean? It kind
mm,
of brings in a really shitty attitude. Um, but as far as meditation goes, from my experiences, because then you get binaural beats as well, which manipulate your brain waves to reach a certain state.
right.
You've got one frequency playing in one ear, you've got another frequency playing in the other ear, and it's actually forcing your brain to a different wavelength. Yeah,
Right.
which again is not you. It's a forced something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
And then you've got,
you could
yeah,
even get into the way that they've changed music here on Earth, what it was originally based off of, as far
that's
as the
right.
frequency to
That's right.
what we're using now, and that's, one could almost deem that as manipulation. But go ahead.
No, no, and you're bang on, because like once I got sick of all these guided meditations and all these other things, I'm like, no, something's not right. Like in my course, something just didn't feel right. And
Yeah.
I had some beautiful moments exploring that, but though they weren't consistent, if that
I
makes sense.
well, I
So
just
then
want to
me
say,
being me,
sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
yep, yep, sorry. So then me being me, I thought, okay, maybe I can manipulate an experience. And so I started exploring sound frequencies, and then I went through different tones, like one at a time. And then when I was playing around with frequencies, there are certain frequencies that will induce an element of bliss. But again, it's that key word. It's induce. It's not naturally gotten. It's an induced state.
Yeah.
There are some frequencies that you'll only hear in one ear. There are some frequencies you'll only hear in the other ear. There are some frequencies that'll make you feel like you're surrounded by other beings. There are other frequencies that do so many different things. So even frequencies have their dark side too.
Yeah, and that's
But
physical
And we're
universe too.
talking about,
I exactly.
yeah,
I don't equate anything that you said right now, whether it's frequencies or even the law of attraction. I don't believe any of that stuff is spirituality. I feel
it's not.
like,
That's
yeah, I
because
mean,
it's not.
yeah, You know,
It's
for
marketing. That's all it is.
well, the thing is, I have experienced the law of attraction. So, I mean, you can equate it to postulates, right? I don't think postulates are
Yep.
necessarily a spiritual thing. I think, okay, you can say that we are Thetans, therefore we created it, therefore maybe it is spiritual, but then we can also say, well, the physical universe is spiritual because we're creating that too, right? So, in my opinion, there is a line where there are spiritual things and then there are physical things. And I still, because your postulates now, okay, maybe in the Scientological sense, this won't actually be accurate. I think postulates are probably something more so spiritual than what I'm making it out to be. But I believe that thoughts are, they have energy, and that frequency, those energies can go out into the universe, but they're particles. They're not spiritual things. They're literal particles, and those particles can bring in whatever you want. I mean, money is also technically particles. So it, am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Anything
Yes.
that we think, anything that is here on this planet, even the things that seem paranormal or seem like they are spiritual, not necessarily spiritual, just because we can't perceive our particles going out and retrieving something that we wanted because of a postulate, doesn't make it spiritual.
Yeah, well, that comes down to the physical universe, and we did a podcast on this, on confirmation bias. If you don't see it happening in the physical universe, did it happen?
Right.
And so you have to have this
Which,
confirmation bias.
yeah.
I send the tennis ball towards the wall and it bounces off, therefore the wall is there.
Right.
And it comes down to that. So
But would you agree that it's a physical thing? It's not necessarily a spiritual thing.
well, it's a matter of what is your consideration of it. I mean, if you
I think if you're playing on this, in this universe, or in this physical plane, I don't believe that there's spirituality to be found. I believe it's not in the manifestations
no,
of
it's
it.
it's spiritual. Yeah. Well, that has everything to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So it isn't
I,
it
yeah.
isn't spiritual.
If it
was
holds mass, it's not spiritual.
right.
That's what I believe.
Right.
And I know I have mass, quite a bit of it, but inside of me somewhere,
Well, and that was
or
the
3
thing.
feet back of the head,
Is I
whatever
was
you believe.
right. So I was trying to get your perspective, your viewpoint on what was spiritual, and Arthur's perspective on what was spiritual, and then I was going to give a couple of mine, and
Yeah.
I'll be really quick.
Can I just throw one more in?
Yeah.
Okay, go. All right, and then I'll go after you.
No, that's all right. Go ahead. We'll you can go ahead and do yours.
Like I have a big issue with this word spirituality, because I think, like we've said before, it's one that will never be properly understood. Now, here's a question: if you didn't have a body, can you have a spiritual experience?
Well, and that was something that I was thinking
You'd
about.
have the most spiritual experience if you didn't have a body.
Would you?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely, because you
but-
are a spiritual being. You're not a physical being.
Okay, let's say
I
then,
threw that
right,
in there because
you
I knew
have-
I was going to start something. Go ahead.
Let's say, right, you have a conscious phenomenon in your home that has the ability to move things, right? We might call
poltergeist.
that an active spirit, yeah.
Mhm.
But there's other names for it: a ghost, a this,
Yeah. Poltergeist usually
poltergeist.
connotates it's a person in a body in the home. It's causing these things. It's not another entity. That's what a poltergeist is.
Now, when we connect, not everybody, but a lot of people can connect with these beings floating around, these trapped consciousnesses. And then it may become a spiritual experience then once you connect with them and you can help them out, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But while they're being
can
a
I
ghost
just say,
and being
currently, while
a
I'm
pain in your
talking to you, sorry,
yes.
I just want to say,
Yeah.
currently, while I'm talking to you, it is technically a spiritual experience, because you are a spirit, I'm a spirit.
That's one of my points.
in the flesh.
In the
In the
flesh,
flesh, though.
it's a the physical universe is a conduit. It is a phone line, if you will, where you have air being forced out of your lungs past your larynx that is changing the vibration of the air into a certain frequency that goes across and then bounces off somebody else's eardrums and then is duplicated by the being through the
Right.
body, so on and so forth.
But we don't need a body
Yes.
to experience a
No,
physical,
no.
to experience a spiritual experience.
Well,
That's
that might be news to some people, but it isn't to the three of us.
Well, that's where the disassociation part comes into play, because the moment
right,
you
right.
remove the body, right,
That's
then you
right.
can have that purely spiritual experience, which is where psychedelics come into it. Because instead of like clearing all your aberrations, doing all the things that there's recipes
Right,
for
you're
to be able to
bypassing a
achieve
lot.
these things,
Yeah.
you take a substance, bang, you're out. However, from previous spiritual experiences to psychedelic spiritual experiences, they're not the same. They're completely different. You can't
Yeah.
even compare the two.
Yeah. Lisa.
Completely different.
So then how do you know that it's actually spiritual, not just euphoria? I mean, I've
That's a
had
great
Well,
question.
I've had
and it is a good
amazing
question.
experiences, even just from having, like I said, that first puff of cigarette that's been like, the world seems brighter, the trees are greener,
Yes,
like
yes.
Freud said
I
sometimes a
think for
cigar
me,
is just a cigar.
yes. For me specifically, I can safely say I know the difference because I experienced those things prior to psychedelics. Just
Mhm.
me being me, but I can't say the same for other people. I cannot say the same. I
Yeah, what's
can't
true for them is true
at
for
all,
them.
because some people, that's right. And if you consider like the amount of promotion around these things, it's the forbidden fruit,
Hmm.
the
mm,
biblical forbidden fruit. The moment that idea pierces into somebody's brain, the desire becomes so compelling to want that fruit. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And so they'll just jump straight to it. And that's where the danger really is. Um,
Well,
if you
that's
spoke to
true
any of
of
my
any
family, they
addiction as
wouldn't
well.
expect. That's right. That's right. And just me being an explorer, um, that's my justification, by the way. Um, I can safely say I do know the difference, but I can't be honest to say that those experiences haven't created something else, because they have,
Mhm. Lisa?
using substance.
I just I think that if we were to actually really try to be spiritual beings, it would be or actually find out the answer to what is spirituality, what are we, what is God, all of that. I honestly think it would be anticlimactic for people, because I think we've been, ever since young, we've been trained to think that the higher the better, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
Definitely.
isn't higher itself?
we can get
Isn't that isn't that a so-called it's an exponent of the physical universe? How can you what is high if you're being spiritual? It's not the physical universe. How does one ascend and get out of the physical universe? Because the concept is endemic to describing a lower versus a higher.
right,
You get what
right.
I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah.
I think is incorrect.
I do
It is
too.
I actually
I
incorrect.
think
do
that's
too.
that's an incorrect statement as well.
Right, because you can only
Because
explain what the language does, and then when you go beyond anything, the language, and Scientology does this to a certain degree, still staying in the physical universe, trying to describe something that is spiritual, not physical.
Yeah. I mean,
yes,
again, like I feel like if people were to really confront themselves, they would see what spirituality is, because you're a spiritual being. You are as close to knowing what spirituality is as you're ever going to get. People are looking for it externally,
Hmm.
but it's internal.
Hmm.
Because if you want to believe that, okay, obviously not one with the universe, I get that, but if you want to believe that, you are of God, if there is such a being, or at least of other people, because a Thetan is a Thetan is a Thetan, right? Then you must believe that within you that is the closest you're going to find to spirituality. Like it's a no-brainer. Like when I say that and people look at me like, huh? I'm like, because they think it's going to church, reading the Bible, listening to some guy, and I don't mean to mock the Christians or whatever, but like, you know, or any religion for that matter. It's just when you go and you look for external things, be it the Bible or drugs, same thing. It's external from you. And that is why it's so anticlimactic. Imagine having the closest experience you can have, the most beautiful, the well, I'm using dualistic terms, but the secret within you, right? And then you get the suppressors who have created every possible avenue for you to be distracted,
Yeah, that's
that
exactly
it's
what I was gonna say.
outside of you. Oh,
Yeah.
look, you know, if you do this, you'll get this. If you do, it's just insane.
Arthur?
Well, let's look at how many disassociative things there are in the world right now, right? Television, yeah?
Hmm.
Digital music. It's not even made by real instruments anymore, like you were saying, John.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not coming from someone's heart. It's coming from an electrical current, electrical
Mm-hmm.
frequencies. And some of these
Monitored by a
frequencies
And
are,
computer.
now it's
Yes.
even
And
AI.
now it's even AI. Yeah.
okay, so now you've got AI as well, right? So humans don't even need to put the effort in anymore. You've got, you know, even meditation, yoga, psychedelics,
Well,
fantasy
I want to stop you with
films
meditation
have
because I do feel like that's
let,
a
let, no,
stretch.
let me hear me out first. Hear me out
Yeah.
first, right? Hear me out first, because you've got all these things, right? And they all have one thing in common, and that is disassociation, right?
No.
Because people believe to find some kind of spiritual space, you need to disassociate from your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one day you will get there. That's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one day you will become the most spiritual being, like it or not, because you will drop the body one day. But then, even with meditation, right? Meditation's a funny one because it is a form of disassociation as well, right? Because most people, you know, instead of like completely engaging their body, and the spirit and the body are actually working one in this current state, being alive, to me, that would be the higher purpose of a spiritual being. Like Ron Hubbard says, going clear. When those voices in your head are no longer aberrated, and it's your God voice in your body in complete cause and complete control, right? But then when you close your eyes and go somewhere else, you know, it might have the appearance of going within, but when you open your eyes, you're exactly where you are.
Okay.
And then you take a psychedelic, and then it throws you right out of your body, and you think, fuck yeah, what an incredible experience,
As an alternative
right?
solution. Yeah.
But yeah, but it comes with fireworks. You know what I mean? It's no different to the serpent whispering in Eve's ear. You know, who's God to say you can't do this when God is the most present human being on this earth, walking on this earth, feeling pain, feeling the gut aches, seeing things, experiencing joy, rolling with the motions. But the moment that's tampered with and manipulated with, now you're unspiritual.
Mm-hmm.
But then those moments of complete clarity, eyes open, not necessarily eyes closed.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like that is complete beingness, as opposed to maybe my beingness is over there, or maybe my beingness is on my phone. Maybe my beingness is in the way I treat people. They're all disassociative things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and psychedelics are a very profound one and a really obvious one, but there's a lot of unobvious ones too that have the appearance of good, but they're still disassociative. Because the more disassociative people we have, the less you're going to be, you know, a walking God in a sense.
Okay. So
I don't know. How's that?
I hear you. I
She
hear
put her
you.
boxing gloves on.
And yes, you are right about the majority of what you've said. Except I think you and I have
Did you just say I'm
different.
wrong?
No. But so I think you and I may have two different types of reality on meditation. So first, again, I want to
Yes,
say that I
very much.
do agree when you visualize, you're taking yourself somewhere else, and that's not the purpose. That's a different kind of meditation. That might be to relieve stress or whatever, but that has absolutely nothing to do with gaining any sort of awareness, in my opinion. Okay, maybe some Buddhists would argue, but whatever. When I
Yep.
talk
Yep.
about meditation, my version of it, it is simply and nothing more than just being here and being comfortable. So it is observing without judgment. So when I say being here, I don't mean you're disassociating from your body. That can be an effect of it. It can be a side effect, but that's not what the point is. And you're not supposed to consciously think to yourself, I need to dissociate or I need to stop thinking or anything like that.
Yes,
No,
yes, yes,
your only
yes.
thing that you are doing is just being in the present moment, and you are observing. So whether it's your thoughts, your surroundings, I mean, when I do meditation, I try to do it with my eyes open. Sometimes I'll do it with my eyes closed if there's people like across from me and distracting me, like John. But
What?
but but honestly, when I'm doing meditation, I'm not trying to go anywhere. I'm literally just trying to be here without judgment. So like I said, instead of
Yep.
looking at a outside and seeing, oh, the windows are dirty, they need a clean, or looking at John, or thinking of the future, or
Sure,
thinking of the
sure.
past, it's literally being here in present time, space, energy and matter, whatever, right? And when you do that, you start to realize what you are as the perceiver. And therefore, that does create a little bit of a dissociation from the compulsiveness of the thinking, the
But that's a
identity
different
that
kind
you
of a
are, and all of that.
disassociation, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. That's what I
It's a
feel
different,
like.
it's a,
It's
yeah.
not a
And like,
rejection.
I agree with you. If I was to say if I was to use the word meditation, the first two TRs are it all the way,
Well,
all the way.
sort of, because
I
even,
believe they are because, like you said, they put you there and
yeah,
here and now.
yeah,
Um, and there is a disassociation that can occur, and I think that disassociation is your own aberrations.
right,
When everything's when you're so present in the room, you know, even the walls have sentience. You know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah, and you're
The
you're able
furniture
to
has some kind of sentience about it as well,
yes, and you're
and you're
able to
completely
observe a
safe.
lot. Yes, yes. But
A
uh,
lot, a lot. Yeah.
for me, the difference with TRs and meditation, going back to yesterday's conversation again, it's that with meditation, it's just you and yourself, right? So you're able to perceive whatever. With TRs, there's obviously another person there. Now, granted, you can still do meditation basically when you're doing TRs, because you're not doing anything differently. You're still just observing. And even if the thoughts come, I guess you can observe them. LRH doesn't specifically say that, but he just says, be there, be comfortable. Now, if you were truly being
Mm.
there and being comfortable, man, I tell you, that is a state that is really powerful to be in, because then you're not at effect.
How long?
But
How
you're
long did
also
it
not
take
afraid
you
to
to
be at
sort of?
effect. Sorry, I'm done.
No, no, that's all right. But I mean, even to reach that point, I don't know about you, but when I originally did the first two TRs, it took me about a week. Hey, of not just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, like I'm talking 2 3 hour slogs
Mhm.
before I reached that point.
That's pretty
Um,
typical.
and the funny thing, yeah, and the funny thing was, like, I was so bloody agitated and so frustrated with the whole process. But then once I got to the end of it, I'm like, holy crap balls,
Yeah.
where have I been this whole time?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
it's
Where have
the
I been? Where was I?
I think the body just tries
Mm,
to, or the body, the mind, it tries to resist the now, the present moment. Because there's
yeah.
always something
Oh,
better to
big
be
time.
doing and distract. Because if you're just sitting with yourself, right, there's all sorts of uncomfortable feelings that present themselves. But you know that's part and parcel of the package.
yeah, well, it's one of those
Mm,
things with TRs where when you're doing that sort of a thing, it's right around the corner, but if you never tried it, you would never know it was right around the corner. And it's so the
knowing
simplicity
how
of
to
it
know.
is, yeah, yeah, knowing how to know.
Yeah.
It's almost dumbfounding that you're like, well, it was there the whole time.
Yeah.
And nobody, I never pointed it out to
Yes.
myself, and nobody else pointed it out to me. And people live their lives and they never heard of the TRs, never heard of Scientology, Dianetics, and so they were never aware of the fact that it was right there. And that's kind of sad to me
Yes.
when I think about that. But that in fact is a reality. Um,
Yes.
so uh, I'll give my spiritual
Is there going to be
moments.
a part two to this?
I don't know. Yeah, we're definitely long forming it today. One of the most spiritual moments I had, and it just popped in my head when I thought to ask you guys the question, was 2003, July 4th, about 9:08 p.m. We had I was living in Clearwater, and I took my kids down to the Sand Castle, which is the church's organization where they deliver the OT levels, and it just so happened to be the furthest point out without putting us in traffic to stand in the parking lot and watch the fireworks display that was being launched from Clearwater Beach. Well, it just so happened that there were thunderstorms rolling in at the same time, and the city of Clearwater had one of two choices to make: either the fireworks were going to get wet or set them off all at once. So they decided we're going to set them off all at once. And as this thunderstorm was rolling in and was developing out over the water, it was an incredibly hot night because it was July. Uh, all of these fireworks went off into the belly of this thunderstorm that was moving in off of the coast in onto land. And it was the most spiritual, physical universe happening that I had ever seen in my entire life to this day. It was the most
Mm,
beautiful.
mm,
You had lightning that was forming off of the fireworks as a negative or positive charge into the clouds and vice versa. All these different colors, the lightning bouncing off of the water. Here I am at this quote unquote spiritual retreat, in Clearwater. Maybe that had something to do with it. All of my kids' mouths were agape, and we were all just standing there. And it was, sort of like what you were saying about being in a band, and we were experiencing and reacting in the physical universe to this light, color, sound. I mean, the sound was just, coming off of the water. It sounds different when you hear thunder on the ocean than it does on land. But that
mm,
was a restimulation of something spiritual. Now, spiritual, the thing with on OT2 where I had this being that had been attached to me that had to experience me being in love and not being in love and living and dying for billions of years as a punishment. That's one spiritual thing that happened on OT2. The other was on Excalibur, where I realized there were other universes and that I could perceive these
mm,
other universes to a degree, but the body got in the way. And then the other one was on L10, where I realized that in these universes, there were six of quote unquote me as a spiritual being existing in different spiritual realms. I know that sounds all tinfoil hatty and all that
mm-hmm.
stuff. And even my auditor said,
Interesting.
and that's all she
Yeah,
said.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
and all I can say is that it was
Mm,
real to me. And do I sit here and think about it or anything like that? No, I don't. But I am aware of these other looking glass me's having different viewpoints, and that there are slightly different angles of the same thing that is going on in the universe that I currently primarily reside in. And all of
mm,
these to me had to do with Scientology in some way. Those were my spiritual things. Two or three spiritual one physical universe. But aesthetics and spirituality go hand in hand, whether it's in the physical universe or it's something of your creation. So on that note, we'll think about doing things getting pretty long here.
Well, how about the next podcast we do? I could discuss what I've experienced around the psychedelics and the pure in that sense as well, because I had a real full-on one the other day. That goes hand in hand with everything we've been talking about,
right?
and
Sure.
that'll open more cans of worms.
And there was something else you guys wanted to talk about as well. Well, you remember what it was? Okay. That's why it's important to write things down. And I didn't.
That was really good, but yeah,
Yeah.
that was really good. There's so many perspectives and so many points of view. Hey, yeah.
Yeah, I just
Personal
want to.
experiences.
Sorry, Arthur.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I just want to add that I know my experience or rather my perspective on spirituality might seem sort of limited to just me. And, you know, when you have a subject as broad as Scientology helping mankind, etc., it kind of looks sort of like, meh, what's the point? You're just, you know, an individual. However, once you do have that experience and you can see yourself as just a perceiver without all these judgments and stuff, you literally become, I guess, well, they say that you can't love others unless you love yourself, right? And if you know what you are, love is automatic. So, you know, all these things that you've done in the past, etc., etc., it's not to say that they just get wiped away, because life doesn't work that way. However, you do know and have more compassion for yourself because you understand what you are and what you aren't. And if you can do that for yourself, you can do that for everything and everyone else. And that ties into where you can actually experience spirituality here on earth. Because I mean, and it goes as far as empathy as well, you know. I mean, we were talking about narcissism yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm going on and on, but
but
it's
when a podcast.
But you know, like with those people, nobody would say a narcissist is spiritual at all. Whereas people might associate Mother Teresa, aside from the controversies, as possibly spiritual. So in that way, you can see that love and spirituality do have a connection. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it depends on the aperture within which you're looking at spirituality. You know, if you're narrow-minded, it could be said that you're not that much of a spiritual person. And if you're not, you're the opposite of narrow-minded, you're a very spiritual person.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to use
that's a judgment in and of itself. And so, are you being really spiritual if you're judging, or is it just better to perceive and not evaluate? Does evaluation have something to do with spirituality?
No.
Arthur?
Because it's dualistic.
Well, okay, so I'm looking at the definition of spiritual. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the first definition, relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. And like in order to like really understand even just that definition, what's a spirit or what's a soul? Because they're not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they come from very different backgrounds. So already, like even just this first definition can be really confusing as well. Relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. So it's saying spiritual is non-physical, mm-hmm. non-material, non-messed.
Yeah.
Right?
So
hence my entire argument.
Yeah. Consideration, consideration is something that a being does. If one is considering something to be a certain way.
That's right.
That's
but
that. Then you enter into a non-spiritual.
Like you can't be spiritual.
Well, my
with a
issue
rock.
with this, right?
You can be with a person or an animal or even a tree. I've felt, I'm not a tree hugger, but I've literally had experiences where I've put my hands on a tree and I felt its essence.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, we talked about that, and that 100%. They have validated the fact that
100%.
Trees are sentient beings now, and plants are. And LRH was saying this in the 60s.
Yeah.
a long time ago. There's a
Yeah.
really cool documentary done in the 70s where a lady was teaching a cactus the alphabet, this Japanese lady, and the cactus um, using oscilloscopes with speakers and stuff. The
Hmm.
cactus was actually responding to her every time she talked to it.
Hmm.
But anyway, but so with this definition here, relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things, the biggest issue I have with this word, right? In order to get even that definition, it needs to be observable, right? And you can't observe it without being in the meshed universe,
That's right. That's right. So we all
right?
agree on
So
that.
is
Sorry.
is spiritual, right? Does spiritual actually have a place while we're alive? Because in order to have this definition, relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul, okay, two words, human and then spirit, right? So you can't be both, or you are one. You know what I mean? So in
Hmm.
order to have a human spirit, you need to be in the meshed universe,
Hmm.
right? If you
Hmm.
take human away, then you're outside of the meshed universe,
Right. Lisa,
right?
you wanted to say something?
Non-observable. You can't use your senses or chemical
Right.
reactions from a
Otherwise, you
physical
violate
body
the
to observe
definition of
these things.
spirituality.
That's right. Yeah.
No.
But then when people bring religious aspect into it, the religious part is really around entities and possession. That's where the spiritual really comes into thing, because a demon is, in its truest sense, is an unclean spirit, still not in the meshed universe. And the only way it can become a part of the meshed universe is it needs something made of mest
He's a
to
host.
Right,
live in this
right, right,
universe,
and that's where
right?
the lower tone levels, lower levels of ARC are more solid, and so that being
That's
objects,
right.
being bodies, controlling bodies, all of that, that's where that enters into. But if you were to have this conversation with somebody that wasn't part of this conversation at all, and there will probably be people that listen to this, and then you interrupted them and said, okay, now you just crossed the line from spiritual to physical, they'd come to blows with you pretty
Yes.
quickly, don't you think?
Mm. Yeah.
Because it's
Well,
it's done all the time, and there's no differentiation as such, because it's by definition it's this or it's that, it's black or it's white. But also,
that's right.
and I want
That's
to I
right.
want to say this, LRH says that a thetan has no matter, energy, space, or time, and he also says that absolutes are unobtainable. Now, I'm gonna go into one of the things that we don't get into very often in ghost hunting and stuff like that. When you go out with a particular optical sensor, you can see disembodied thetans as
That's
orbs.
right.
Okay.
But it's
Now,
not complete mess, is it?
but it's not complete messed, is it? But it is proof of absolutes are unobtainable, because a thetan has no matter, energy, space, or time. But they tend to want to think that they
Yes.
do. So they go around producing some matter, energy,
That's
space, and
right.
time with a face on it. I've taken many, many, many photographs this way, where you either see skulls or you see faces with fedora hats on them. And it's not just me
That's right.
imagining there's a face there. There's a face there. Okay. And you have people that say, well, that's your brain tricking you into thinking that there's, oh, come on. That's not, no. If I see a tree and you see a tree and another person sees a tree, is that our brain tricking us that there's a tree there? Then you're going to have the people that say, well, you are living in the matrix. And okay, I get that, but still, absolutes are unobtainable. Is it spirituality to see orbs, or is it just ghost hunting and it's in the physical universe? It's a gray area.
If they're a being, they're
It's a
spiritual.
very gray
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, if they're a being,
If
it's
they
it's
have a life force, it is spiritual.
right. What's the line of
Well, life
demarcation that it
force or
goes?
sentience,
Yeah, right.
because in order for a rock to exist, it needs to have some kind of life force. Otherwise, it'd just be particles we can't see.
Yeah.
Those particles are maybe unobservable to the human eye. Like
Mm.
even the distance between us, you're on one part of the world and I'm on the other part of the world. If I was to look at you on a flat level, I'd see you from a distance. I mean, in reality, let me change that. Let's say we're 100 meters apart from each other. There's a
Right.
lot of space between us,
Yeah.
right? And it's
There's perspective.
invisible to our eye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
Because of
technology
anchor
will show
points.
us that's not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because our senses in the human body aren't quite that advanced, but sometimes we get glimpses of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes we tap into that space and then things appear, shadows, voices.
Mhm.
Sometimes our bodies just go, ugh. They slip into these other dimensions intentionally or by mistake. Um, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it is possible. We are proof that we can slip into these other dimensions consciously with a human body attached.
Mhm.
Still. So yes, and that's why a medium who talks to spirits is called a medium, because they're in between non-messed
They're
world
via.
and messed world.
Yeah.
Yeah, while they're in the messed world, so they're using their spiritual vehicle, if you will, bodiless, to be able to communicate with non-messed beings or consciousnesses.
Lisa?
Well, I don't have much of an opinion when it comes to ghosts and spirits and that sort of thing. I believe it might be possible, but as for me saying, oh, I've seen it myself and I've experienced it and it wasn't a creation of my mind, I couldn't say that. So I'm ill-equipped to answer that. But like I said, it would be considered a spiritual thing.
Mhm.
Just as, like I said, us having a conversation right now is a spiritual thing because you're a
100%.
spirit.
Mhm.
I'm a spirit. Artie's a spirit.
Mhm.
The cat over there is a spirit.
Right behind the monitor, sitting
He's
on
listening.
my Mac Mini. So yeah, so there is spirituality involved in psychedelics, one way or the other. It is forcing spirituality, or enforcing it through a physical means to the body.
Yeah.
I think we would all agree.
But I do
And there
believe that
definitely
it is a
are entities as
compensation.
well.
It is something extra and external that isn't necessary for that experience.
Right. Artie?
I'm just thinking. I'm thinking.
Put you on the
Because
spot.
the hard thing about because the hard thing about it is psychedelics have been a big part of human evolution as well.
Sure. Well, yeah, because they were the only
Yeah, Joe
means.
said the same thing.
Yeah, Joe said the same thing. They were the only
Yeah.
means to get there at some point, as far as from a technological standpoint, in my estimation, and of course I'm taking the more Scientological standpoint on it, is there are
Yes.
means to it, there are means to an end. They may not be the best way to get there, but they will get you there at least part of the way.
But again, human evolution, fine, fair enough. We've gotten more intelligent. We've made our lives easier. But is that any closer to spirituality? I don't think so.
And that was my point earlier. That was my point earlier with the Dave Grohl thing, is just because the technology is there, is music better? No.
Yeah.
And is it aiding things? I mean, you can say spiritually, we opening people up with psychedelics and all that stuff. Well, you're making it more real to people that, damn, what the hell was that? That was incredible. All these things did this and that, and colors blurred, and I was seeing this, and okay, now what are you going to do with it? Now what are you going to
Well,
do?
maybe just from what you were saying then,
That
because it
irritates my
impacts you
wife when I
so
say that. Now
strongly.
what are we going to do about it?
No, it doesn't.
But because these substances impact you so strongly, you do see a world that is not this world, and in some cases, worlds, even if it's, so if I was to say the geometric patterns, what's interesting about those geometric patterns is they're more than just patterns. Like each little dot that creates those patterns are patterns you've never seen in the physical world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're so chaotically organized, they're perfect. Even if it's just a great big mess of patterns, like pattern upon pattern upon pattern upon pattern upon pattern upon pattern, each pattern has its own consciousness, and you can sense that when you're in the experience. right? Now, not all entities have physical forms. Yeah. And it's like
Well,
if we consider our physical bodies,
yeah.
it's what, 15 billion individual cells.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of those individual cells is a consciousness in itself, all working as a collective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So each cell has its
Identity.
own agenda. It has its
Yeah.
own identity. It has its own purpose. Kind of like an ant. You know, an ant's nest wouldn't exist without thousands of ants. Our bodies wouldn't be a body
Mm-hmm.
without billions of cells, and each
Mm-hmm.
one of those cells, you
Mm-hmm.
know, have their own function, their own. They're actually individual entities as well
Uh-huh.
that, with an incredible amount of energy, make us physical in the flesh
Mm-hmm.
that we can observe with our eyes without special equipment.
Right.
You know, it's that whole case of a microscope. You know, how powerful can a microscope be before you get to the end?
Right. Yeah. Well,
You don't.
Lisa's
You
dying to
don't.
say something
Yeah.
here.
Okay. Like I,
Okay.
I have shared like very much a similar viewpoint, and it would actually be a whole new podcast, quite honestly. But really, like I have wondered. Okay, so there's me, the Thetan, and obviously you got the BTs and clusters and whatever the fuck else. But the cells, right? I've also considered, because obviously they have a job, they're doing something. Now, are we as Thetans controlling it? Because I'm not consciously aware of that. You know, like if you go into neuroscience, they would say, oh well, you know, subconsciously, like your brain's doing all of that, and it's helping, it's telling, you know, the various parts to blah blah blah. But you know, are those cells sentient? And if so, if you go further down and you go to particles, are particles sentient? Yeah, it's like,
Well, Eller,
because they
That's a
move,
good
they have
question.
motion.
Yeah.
They're not just
yeah.
rocks.
Well, LRH says,
Yep.
and I've mentioned it before in other podcasts, the biggest worry of a Thetan is that at the bottom of the dwindling spiral, they will become a particle.
Mm.
Okay. And so if you want to go that far, you could say that the gamut, the spectrum of it is completely sentient being to being objects. And you are a grain of sand on the beach. And he says the physical universe is littered, and this is to both of your points, is littered with life. And this also goes into
Yes.
Michael Crichton's character in Jurassic Park of Ian Malcolm, the guy that talks about chaos theory, played by Jeff Goldblum, where he says life will find a way.
Yeah.
And that is
And it does.
and it's so very important that
Considerations are senior to the physical
considerations
universe.
are senior to the physical universe, and you cannot look through the aperture or the lens of just what the physical universe is. It is that the physical universe is because of the life behind it.
Yeah.
And I think that is the ultimate point
Yep.
of all of our viewpoints.
And that's why the whole self-discipline thing came about yesterday. And my point was certainty.
That's right. That's right. It's sort of an order of podcasts that
Yeah.
we're kind of in a line of consciousness doing these podcasts, and we're all like, yeah, that'll be a great idea. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
And here we are.
And here we are.
Yeah. We might need to split this one in two.
In two, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm happy to continue if you guys want to continue and just split it up, because I'm really enjoying this. If you guys have the time.
He's in with Derica anyway. So
Is he?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
because if we consider as well, right, once we drop the body, life still continues.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's a deterioration, it's still a living organism deteriorating to feed something else. It'll be consumed by something else. So life never really
it's an energy transference, in other words.
Yes.
Yeah. And
well,
but
I wouldn't even
also
call
the
it a
sentient
transfer,
part,
a change, maybe.
Because
yeah,
I get he's not wrong though. There is a transference of energy, but that's half of the picture.
Yeah,
is
that's the
there
physical
still,
side.
yes, because obviously the worms are coming in and they're eating and whatever, but like we were saying with the cells and the sentient, like where does it begin and end? And it's just
Well, that's the
crazy
question
to
of
think
questions,
about.
isn't it? That's why
Yeah.
people go to psychedelics. That's why people go to meditation. That's why people go to philosophy. That's why people go to science. That's why
Yeah,
people use telescopes. That's why people use microscopes. That's why we use, electricity now to discover some of these things.
Yeah.
But when we still don't even know how electricity works or what it
Well,
is,
right.
but we know it's there.
yeah.
And what do
You know
they
what I mean?
what do they find out? And Lisa just said this the other day when I was doing a podcast, a podcast graphic. She said, as above, so below.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, you
Mm.
have to look at that from the macro to the micro, but they're finding that, okay, well, the manifestations are just as similar on the galactic level as they are at the subatomic level
Right.
in
Mm.
in the physical universe. But
So is that a true statement then? As above, so below.
is it?
If you have to look at things like cause and
Just
effect and
asking. I'm just
the
asking.
polarity and everything, I mean, this goes back to
Well,
hermetic
even cause
principles
and
as
effect.
well.
That's right. But even if you look at cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
You can literally just remove the word effect
Okay,
because everything's
explain.
cause, right? Like if I wanted to cause an effect, then I'm causing something very specific. But even that effect is still in some kind of cause.
Well, you could also say that cause could be at effect too, an effect too, because
Yes, yes,
yeah, with I mean,
yes.
why would you need to cause something unless you were technically at effect?
Right.
Well, when you cause something, it's a fresh thing, isn't it? Like it's a fresh postulate, it's a fresh something.
Right,
It's an
but
idea that appears.
they would have, but it doesn't just appear from nowhere. If you think to yourself, okay, you're sitting here, right, and you're thinking,
Is true?
I would like to have an apple. What is
Yes.
what is the thing that caused you? You were at effect because you want an apple, so you're causing yourself to go to the kitchen, right?
Which is a cause in itself, isn't it? The effect,
Exactly.
Well,
the desire for an apple is a cause as well, isn't it?
Well, it's also being at effect though, because why do you need an apple?
like
All right.
Ellery says in the axioms that it, in order and then and I don't want to get off on games, but in order to play a game, a being has to become aberrated. Therefore, they have to elect themselves to be effect, and otherwise they
Exactly.
stay at cause. They stay at cause, which is to your point that we talk about very frequently. Well, why do I need to be in the physical universe? Why do I need to be in a body if I am at just complete, total, and utter knowing
Exactly.
cause? Then there is no
Mm.
point to come back and do anything in a body in the physical universe.
I mean, if
But
you
is that being effect?
yes,
Are you being effect of the
Well,
physical universe because you don't want to be in it?
well, think of God, okay? Everybody is, and I'm probably gonna get shit here, but seriously, God, right, is supposed to be cause, okay? Technically,
Right,
if
which
you have
puts
to think of the
everybody else at
concept,
effect.
yeah. But then you think to yourself, okay, well, why would he create all the stuff that he created, Earth, humans, etc., if he wasn't that effect? Because if God is whole and complete and doesn't need anything, doesn't why would he create? Why that is being effect.
Well, right, because he want
well, what
and
if,
I'm not
right?
even gonna say he
Even
because it wanted
wanting,
it wouldn't be it isn't a gender
yeah.
because it wouldn't be a he, it would be an it. It wanted to play a game, and he went, well, let's see what happens, because if I knew everything, what's the point in seeing
Yep.
what happens, because you know it already.
But if it wanted to play a game, it would be at effect
That's my point.
because of the desire to.
Right. So even quote unquote God itself said, I'm going to be the effect, because if I knew it already, there's no point in me being the effect. I had to say I don't know everything, and to my point, you asked me the other day, you know, was I being critical of quote unquote God when I mentioned my realization in session on how I came into the physical universe, which is, for lack of a better expression, seeds dropping off of a larger hole, so to speak, and it said, "Go forth and experience." And I'm like, "What? Well, who are you to tell me that I need to go forth and experience? And what is it you want me to experience? We're in a different. Wait a minute. Oh, wait. Okay. Now I'm here experiencing in
Dimensions
blackness,
and viewpoints.
dimensions and viewpoints, and that I was being critical of quote unquote God for doing that. But it was just, well, I never agreed to this.
And then I asked you, what was the overt if you were critical?
Right.
And then you came up with individuation.
Individuation. Yeah. Right. Well, I had been involuntarily individuated from the greater group.
Wow.
From
if it's involuntarily, then it's not your overt.
Well, that's
take some responsibility.
Well, and so there is the point that if it within that is if it's go off and experience this and report back, and I'm relaying this in terms of the physical universe, because if you're in the spiritual universe, you can't convey it this way. What's there to experience if you're right. in the theta universe, right? Yeah. Am I right?
Yeah.
Right.
Can I chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're not trying to experience, because if you're outside of the physical universe, technically, unless you obviously are like everybody else, which is that we haven't reached awareness, you're going to be stuck there at serenity of beingness. So, which is a good thing.
Is it?
It's a good thing, because you don't crave, you don't desire experience.
Well, this guy did.
Apparently, and that's why. Well, this is what I'm saying.
And then I anthropomorphized and said, "This guy, this entity."
I know that it is your. Sorry, Artie. I'll be 1 sec. I know that it's. I'm not trying to evaluate for you, although we aren't in session. So I'm gonna invalidate that and
fine.
say
Conversation. It's fun.
And say that you think that
conveyance of viewpoints.
You think that maybe it was individuation that was forced upon you. Maybe it wasn't.
I'm just saying that's the way it seemed, is because
I mean, how many?
It was other determinism.
Well, this is the thing, though, as well. It might not have been. It might have been yours, and you've just, the reactive mind has created this scenario. But obviously, that's.
Well, I mean, anything and everything is open for discussion.
How easy is it for us to be victims? Quite honestly.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Very, apparently in this universe, pretty goddamn easy.
Exactly. How easy is it for us to deflect and blame shift? And, I mean, I read about these toxic behaviors that narcissists have, manipulators or whatever, abusive people. And I'm like,
I hate that word.
I've done that before. I suppose it depends on the severity and the frequency and how, all of that. But it's like we seem to have intrinsically developed these things. I mean, most of us deflect. Oh yeah, well you were the one, but anyway, that goes beyond the scope of the conversation, I guess. Now we're getting into behavior and psychology.
Yeah. So Artie, what were you going to say about what we were talking about?
Okay, so the God part. Let's just start with God.
Yep.
And then I'll go back to cause and effect. But let's start with God.
You should title this podcast
the thing with
Explosive God, Interview.
Yeah, you should call it Just Stuff. So the hard thing with the God aspect is what God means, and it's such a confusing word, like spirituality can be as well. Mm-hmm. Because depending on your viewpoint of God is where your opinion's going to be based. So if your opinion that God is an entity that created this world in our image or his own image or her own image or its own image, then your argument's going to always be based on that.
Mm-hmm.
But what if God was everything we've been discussing this evening, as in true spiritual being in the best form?
Mm-hmm.
That conversation that you have with yourself, because even sin, right, is going against the word of God. Now, we all know what's best for ourselves. And like the podcast we did yesterday, why do we do things that we know we shouldn't, right?
Right.
That would
Overt
be
acts.
sinning.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the true meaning of what sinning is. Sinning isn't doing something bad to someone. Sinning is going against the word of God. So your physical body going against your spiritual voice,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we're all trying to achieve, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Complete connection with our spirit being while we're in this flesh avatar, ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at the Bible, you can see that those conversations happening, right? But the impression that's been given to us is that God is this thing in the sky, outside of the firmament or the firmament, and all these things. But if you go from the perspective of God is your internal voice that knows the truth, that knows what you should be eating, that knows what job you should be doing, that knows how to attract things into your life, that knows how to do these things, there's another perspective of God there.
That's
And
mine.
from studying Scientology, that's exactly where Ron Hubbard is trying to get us.
Yeah.
By going up the OT levels, right?
Yeah. But going with your own knowingness, because you already know, you've just forgotten, or you've gotten yourself to change your mind, so to speak.
And the only thing I don't like about religion is the way it's been bastardized in that way, because once it actually meant something in a language that we still don't quite understand, because like the English interpretations of these books are really old, and language has changed so much in that time.
Yeah, it has.
So we don't even know what this word God means. We think we know, but we actually have no idea, because that is a translation of something else, which is a translation of something else, which is a translation of something else.
Yeah, it's like the rumor line.
So by the time we get this 3-letter word, nobody knows what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's one part. The other part, cause and effect. So I was saying, making the claim that everything's always in cause, right? But I think in a practical sense, cause and effect is on a completion of cycles. And so when you've reached effect, you've completed a cycle of cause. So if I was to cause dinner to happen, I'd either go purchase it and the effect is I've got it, or I'd have to cook it and then the effect is I've cooked it and it's ready to eat. And then I start a new cause and effect, which would be to eat the food, consume the food. And once I've devoured it, then I've reached effect.
Yeah, and that's start, change, stop in Scientology.
That's right.
It's a cycle
which is
of
pretty
action.
cool, because he's broken it down perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
He's broken it down perfectly.
Mm-hmm. So can you start, change,
how's
stop
that?
in the philosophical theta universe? Can you start, change, stop? Because there is no time. There is no time in the theta universe.
I think the only thing that will make that never reach effect is because we're always looking for physical observations through our physical bodies,
and that
when there's
comes
so
back,
much we physically can't observe.
right? And that is where confirmation bias comes in. Is, did I throw the ball?
That's right. That's
so
right.
it's feedback.
Yeah.
And how can you have feedback in the theta universe, in the philosophical spiritual universe, without feedback? You look like you have something you want to say.
Oh, I'm just like,
Are you?
I tell you, we could probably talk until this evening about this stuff. It is so, so interesting.
I love it. Yeah.
I love it too.
Isn't it? I love talking this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and that is the thing that I think everybody is aware of, is they're aware of that there's something more to this than what, quote unquote, the meeting of the eye is that they're aware. And they have different ways of either accurately depicting it or describing it, or less accurate ways. And some people say, well, an experience with a psychedelic is as close as you're going to get. That's kind of the impression. I don't know what you think, but that Rogan is talking about in his podcast, is that's as close as you can get, and this opens the door to all of this stuff.
I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, but if I had to sort of put that in this sort of way, so you said it's a key out, right? So that would technically go away from the reactive mind, which is, I guess you can call it the fight, flight, freeze response that the neuroscientists like to term the primitive brain or the reptilian brain. So once that part of, I mean, I actually went to see somebody when I was younger, who was a sensory specialist. Basically said that, you know, the reason why it can be difficult to just do normal things in the physical universe is because you're constantly having all the sensory input, and that's creating distractions like light and everything. And when somebody has sensory issues, it's too much for them, right? Or it depends, because some people actually
overwhelming.
Some people actually have less, so it's underwhelming. So, you know, bright light, they'd be looking in the sun and their mom be like, hey, don't do that, you're going to burn your retinas, you know, kind of thing. Anyway, so in terms of that, I can see how when you remove that side, because our fight, flight, freeze is almost always there. It's what enables us to really stay alive.
Yeah, that's survival.
Exactly,
in a body.
survival. Yeah, in a body. So
and is it a bad thing?
When that is technically, it's not always a bad thing. It's good and it's bad. So the bad part is the reactivity when it's
only
illogical.
bad.
Sorry?
Yeah, it's only bad when you react to it negatively.
Yes. Yeah.
And the hard thing about it is the stain that has attached to it creates, it's the language around it is what creates the negativity around it.
Yeah.
Because there's so much on it, you know, people identify with having anxiety and this and that, blah, 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 blah. But none of them actually explore what it is to get a reality on what it actually is and how natural a response it actually is.
I would agree. It's very much, and that's as far as it goes.
And let's not forget that it also helps with a lot of our body functions in terms of brain, not reactive mind technically, but brain. You know, it helps regulate your heart rate and your breathing, and you know, all these automatic responses, kind of a thing. Anyway, so when you take away, or at least limit that, at least the reactive experiences, maybe not heart rate and all that stuff, when you limit those experiences negatively, it will create obviously that key out, and then that's when things like the third eye and all of this stuff can in the brain can technically be more receptive to other things, right? Your perception gets higher, and therefore you might experience things like, you know, the psychedelic stuff that you do where you see in different colors and all this stuff. So that's beyond our level of awareness. So I can definitely see that happening.
Well, I think in my time of those kinds of explorations, because I explored third eye activity many, many years ago, and I have to say, having psychedelic experiences, I think that's what's really being talked about. I can't help but feel that the movement of the chakra and, you know, these systems coming into Western society has been a bit of a prerequisite to taking psychedelics, because so many people meditate, do yoga for this third eye experience, to see this beautiful lotus open up inside of them, or you know, all the things that you hear people discussing.
Right.
And like I've seen yoga teachers teaching this stuff, you know, talking about it as they've read it out of a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of find myself in disbelief with their claims.
Right.
Um,
At the end of the
because
day, they're
if you
still
did
looking
open,
at experience and they're still wanting sensation.
they are, and I'm not dismissing that. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
And it is a sensation, and it is something to strive for. But that's been quite a theme pre psychedelics now, right?
Mm.
And so you take psychedelic, and if you want third eye action, it's just like bang, here it is. You don't have to meditate for it. You don't have to do yoga anymore. You don't have to do any of these things. All you got to do is drink this brew from these plants, and now you'll get third eye action like you wouldn't believe. So I can't help but feel that we've been kind of groomed to
Towards
this
that.
point now. Yeah,
Mm.
yep.
That's very
You've
interesting.
been practicing meditation.
Yes.
Have you had, you know, a third eye activation, whatever that's supposed to mean? And I say that wholeheartedly, whatever that's supposed to mean,
Right.
because that's what people aim for, this psychic ability of third eye ability. Um, and what if third eye activity is really simple?
Right.
You know, if I was to say to you, imagine a fridge. Can you imagine a fridge in your mind space?
Yes.
Can you open that fridge?
Okay. Done.
Okay. Now, what is not third eye about what you just did?
I mean, but that's exactly my point though. That is exactly my point. Is that people think that this third eye thing is supposed to be like fireworks going off and like this great experience and stuff.
The
But
psychedelics will do that to you. And that's what I
yeah,
mean. I believe we've been groomed to this point.
right. For me, I think spirituality is just very simplistic. I think that it's got nothing to do with any kind of stimulus response, but I've said that already and I'm going on in circles. So yeah.
Yeah. Yep. It's a word that's going to be a constant trap. It's never
Yeah.
going to have. It doesn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end.
Yeah.
Because like people will take on this word spirituality and then make it a way of their life. Like, you know, I see spiritual people that work for the government. And I think that is the most unspiritual thing you could ever do. You know, you're
Right.
working for an organism that is,
Suppressive?
I don't know, yeah, let's be polite, suppressive. We'll say it's suppressive
Yeah.
because that's another rabbit hole. You know, how can you be spiritual and work for the devil?
Right. Then you
It's all a
You know what I
matter of
mean?
it's all a
Like,
matter of viewpoint, isn't it? One man's freedom fighter is another man's
isn't it?
terrorist.
well, the
Isn't
thing
it?
is that I think it's the whole awareness thing though. You know, like when they say overits make one blind. It's the same phenomena really. I mean, if you don't know that you're being evil, you know, that's
Well, then
that's
are you
kind
being spiritual?
sorry?
Well, then are you being spiritual? Like, if you're
No,
doing
of
an
course not, because
evil act and you don't even
unawareness,
know it,
yeah, no, unawareness is on the opposite end of the spectrum of spirituality. You can't be spiritual if you're unaware. And you can try, but
and maybe that's the word that should be used as opposed to spirituality, awareness.
Well, and I would agree. I would agree that awareness is probably is above viewpoint, is above
Yeah.
spirituality, is awareness, because to the degree that you are knowing of something is to the degree that you are at cause over something. And that's why
Yes.
Scientology, in the definition of the word, is knowing how to know. I mean, that
Yes.
pretty much encompasses everything, whether it's meditation,
Yes.
exteriorization, DMT, all of this stuff it's
Whatever.
all
Yeah.
whatever is all the search to know. I
yeah.
mean,
Mm.
if you are being
Mm-hmm.
the effect of something and you want to experience it, you want to know what it is that experience is, right?
Yeah. And I just
That's right.
recently had a realization about knowingness. So, you get know, understand, and then it goes down, right? I had the realization that knowledge and knowingness is two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can have knowledge of,
Big time.
but then you just understand it. That's where understanding comes from, right? That's not know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Right. If you can know something and
Well,
not
I
apply
could
it.
have a. That's right. That's right. It's like for me going through this purification rundown. I've read the material, right? But now that I'm in it, man, I'm telling you, I
It's
know it.
different.
I
Yeah.
know it.
Yeah. It's like conceptual understanding versus knowingness. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
say conceptual understanding, physical universe, knowingness, spiritual.
Yeah. And
Yep.
conceptual understanding of the theta universe or spirituality is a far, far, far different thing than it is within the laws of known and unknown physics of the physical universe and the interweavingness that the spiritual / theta universe uh, weaves into that.
Yeah. And I think that's
Mm,
where like the whole conversation really comes from. This whole thing is okay, so we all have different understandings. If you look at know, understand, and then
Right.
downscale, right?
Yeah.
Different understandings of what spirituality is, but what is the know? Your experience and Artie's experiences, sorry, and my experiences, we could all know what that spiritual experience is, but trying to, put it out there is very
The
difficult.
cause
You
of the
get to,
cosmic, you know what
isn't
I
it?
mean?
yeah,
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
yeah.
Isn't it? Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I
like,
know
even
what
though to me,
psychedelics are like. You know what I mean? Like I actually know what they're like. I don't
yeah.
need. I've got mass around that. You
Hmm.
know what I mean?
right,
And I can make my own conclusions as to whether they're good or bad or whatever. I see both sides. I see some potential for them, but not in the way they're being promoted. And I also see the dangers in them too. And I know the dangers in them.
Hmm.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
know how manipulative these things can be. Um, and I wholeheartedly say that because I know that,
You have a
I'm not
conceptual understanding of it.
theorizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very important. And that's a good point, Lisa.
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, in going back to one of my books, The Tao, and this is Stephen Mitchell's rendition, or translation rather. He says, well, from the translation, it says, "The more you know, the less you understand." And I feel like
That is
that
so
is,
true.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, and is true conceptual understanding and knowingness just knowing that there's far more that you don't know than you know.
mm.
Mm,
It seems that way.
yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
Well, here's
Is the ultimate conceptual understanding of everything, not just the physical universe, but the spiritual theta universe, spiritual universe, whatever you want to call it, and the physical universe and universes, knowing that you have yet to know everything.
Right.
yeah,
Because and this is
yeah,
why I say this physical universe is a distraction, because you never ever 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 stop learning. You can just infinitely continue learning on forever, and that is understand, understand, understand. It's not no, no, no. So the question becomes, how do you
yeah.
get to knowingness?
Yeah, how do you get to knowingness? I love the podcast with Joe Rogan he's talking to people that have done things like, and I'm not going to use a musical reference, but he's talking to David Lee Roth from the group Van Halen, and David is a very colorful character, and he said he's talking to him about the minutia of doing something from a guy who's done a lot of drugs. Dave's done a lot of drugs, but he's also a very interesting guy that's taking up rock climbing, and then in his 60s learned to be an EMT in Manhattan, New York, out of the blue, and went and wore that hat, learned how to do it, and drove ambulances. And it's one of the biggest bands in rock history. And it was interesting for him to say that he was talking about, it's not 10,000 hours, it's not 20,000 hours, it's 30,000 plus hours that you learn something.
Yeah.
And I love listening to people, what in any walk of life, I don't care what it is, when they get down to this devil's in the details thing.
But is that knowingness though?
Or is it knowingness? Is it experience? I already got a big smile on his face.
That's well, I think you can feel when somebody knows something. You know, there's something about the truth that resonates through our bodies.
Yeah, I think that's why I
that
like it
can't
so
be
much.
denied.
Don't you, Lisa?
Yeah, but here's
Yeah. I mean,
so I just want to say,
is knowingness certainty?
Well, I think it's certain, and then you drop down into the physical plane, the physical universe.
So then that's understand.
Certainty is certainty based off of doing. Can one have certainty without having done it? That's a question.
I mean,
can you have certainty
I'm
without
certain
having done it? I'm
that
certain.
if I throw, I'm certain that if I throw my mug across the room, it'll probably break.
Well, that's prediction based off of that is
Okay,
prediction
sure.
based off of earlier comparable magnitudes, and then you start getting
the
into,
laws.
Yeah, then you get into the data series as far as prediction, reliable source, information that you have in comparable magnitudes. If you don't have any comparable magnitudes in the physical universe, can you be certain in the theta universe or spiritual universe? But see, again, you're dropping down into the physical plane in order to do this, which is to your point that it's understanding.
Yeah. I just thought of something while you were talking, which is funny because so knowing sort of implies not having done, like you were saying. Understand implies external, like is you have to understand something, therefore it's got to come to you. So it's like, I guess, dependent on the viewpoint. I mean, I know LRH says that he's not telling us anything we don't already know. We've just forgotten, right? He said that.
Yeah.
So so then technically, because Scientology is found in everything, and it's a broad subject, that means that we already know everything there is to know. We've just forgotten. So understanding is just it's a compensation. It's something that we do just because we've forgotten. It's kind of like, hey, I don't remember my name, and somebody has to come and tell you, right? Then you understand, okay, my name is Lisa, right? So we know everything there is to know. We've just forgotten. And I guess that's where awareness comes in and reactivity. Like I truly believe this, because when I've been on a very ethical path, and you even get people who have done things like they've taken like a month's fast, which is crazy to most of us, but they say the more that they fast, the more clarity comes to them. And I think that clarity is knowingness. So hence why I say you remove the sensation, you'll experience the knowingness, because you can understand everything, right? Anybody can learn anything, basic study course especially included, but when you truly know something, that's a totally different ballgame.
Right. And what is and I want to just make this point, I agree with you completely. What is the feeling, and maybe I'm dropping this down into the electronics of a body and everything, but what is the feeling? What happens when one gets that brief moment when one understands something?
Well, honestly, for me, there is no feeling. As soon as there's a feeling, I'm dropping back into sensation, and when I'm doing it, I'll just like it's like it's like I feel infinitely capable and I have all the answers at hand, and like at super speed kind of a thing. But there's no egocentric. There'll be a moment where I'm like, whoa, you know.
Yeah. So is that certainty?
That's the knowing, but
Yeah,
that's the knowing right there.
Getting in the
Yeah.
zone.
Yeah.
That zone.
Yeah. So knowing and certainty are just right, parallel, right and left, above or below. See, and I have to use this in terms that physical universe terms, just to have the conversation, which is ironic in its own right. So is certainty above understand and know?
I think certainty is understand.
Yeah.
No
LRH would agree.
Is above that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
So far we've been discussing all this stuff for the last, I don't know, 2 hours at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know I've had a spiritual experience with you guys discussing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know everything we've said up until this point has been nothing but noise.
Yeah. Well, you get that there's that one.
Just saying.
I'm not trying to reduce it by saying, but there's that one moment where it becomes a spiritual thing, because that's where you have ARC, you have KRC, and
yes.
And there it is. And anything beyond that is, like you say, just noise. So on that note, I will try and get this into post-production. And
I just want to find something really quick. You guys can continue real quick. I'm trying to find something.
Well, I think we've and it.
All right, I've got another one for
bunny
you.
Keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. Go ahead, Artie.
I really like Alan Watts. I love that guy. I could listen to that guy for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And like he says, what's the meaning of life? Or there's another story he has where one of the monk's students was asking his master what the meaning of life was, and he goes, "Oh, come back after, and I'll show you." And he's like, "Meet me in the garden." And so they go to the garden, and the student asks the monk, "So what's the meaning of life?" And the monk responds, "See that bamboo? It's taller than that one." And that was it.
Oh, shoot. I can't find it. I couldn't find it right now, but it basically had to do with the first level is, well, there's I don't know what other word to use, but the Tao. Let's call it consciousness. Then under that it is knowledge. Then under that it is thinking, or whatever. You get the various stages, so that sort of goes in line with this. And I really do believe that everybody has it within themselves to know things. It's just that their awareness. This is why all these spiritual people say, "Oh, you've got a blockage in this chakra and that, and you need to clear it and stuff."
Oh my God!
It's honestly the same fucking thing, though. It's just it's different. It's different words, semantics, but honestly, it's the same thing. You are blocking yourself off from knowingness. You just don't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And auditing.
But you've got to remember, right?
Right.
The blocked chakra is not from a church or a religion or Scientology. It's from a spiritual movement.
Right.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. So there's, again, freedoms, boundaries, and purposes, and there is no counter intention, only failed intention. So if you intend to know, you very well may end up knowing and having certainty. If you intend not to know, you very well may end up in quite somewhat of a different place.
If you really have a look at it and see, like, I mean, I have spent at least a decade of my 35-year-old life searching for answers, and I've been looking
Mm,
and reading and doing all the stuff, and I've been gaining understanding, but that knowledge isn't there. Like, okay,
yeah.
no, sorry, let me backtrack. The knowledge is there, the knowingness isn't. And when I say it isn't, I mean, yes, it is, but it's not where I want it to be. There's like, I'm not, I haven't done my OT levels yet, so that's got to be something I got to take into consideration. But what I'm trying to say ultimately is that in order to know, you have to remove those things that's making you unaware. You can't just read a book and that's going to make you more aware. No, that book's going to give you
Mm,
understanding to hopefully make you think, or in fact, it even goes beyond thinking. Because, like I said in the previous podcast, we are cyclical in nature. Therefore, we are constantly going to repeat the same behaviors over and over until we handle that which is unconscious and make it conscious. I think Carl Jung said that, but then there was a debate that he never really said that. Anyway, point is, get auditing.
Well, and I think it's also
and you're
interesting.
right. Get auditing 100%, because then the answers evolve naturally. Like even for me going through the Purif at the moment, there are things like realizations that I'm having that once were confusions, whereas now they're happening really straight. It's a
Mm,
no-brainer now
Hmm.
as
right.
stuff's coming out of me
Yeah,
and
because
not
even yesterday,
influencing my mind.
Hmm.
Yep.
you said you were experiencing more clarity. I think it was
Yes.
yesterday.
Yes. So to me, that would be more on the spiritual side of things. You
Hmm.
know, no woo-woo, no magic, no castles and fairies, no waving a wand for something to occur. Just that clear clarity to me is the ultimate spiritualness a human could ever have. And I know there's more to come.
Hmm. Well, and this brought to mind something that happened to me when I finished new OT 7, and I had done all of the original OT levels. I had done OT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6 new 7. And when I finished, I remember exactly where I was, what direction I was looking, where the sun was, everything. And I thought to myself, there's more to this. There's more to do. At
Yeah,
the end of
yeah.
at the end of
It's never ending.
LRH's bridge, and it's no criticism of him or Scientology or Dianetics or anything. It was just there is more to do, and I found that when I was right at the end of that I was doing stuff that was part of the Excalibur and everything like that. And then when I finished that, I was like, well, there's definitely more to do here than everything that I've done already.
Mm,
So,
mm,
that's, if you were to say a negative certainty and a positive certainty, use a physical universe idea, it was a negative certainty that I'm not done yet. That's a good thing,
yeah, yeah,
as opposed to I know it
yeah.
all in my mind.
And there's only one downside to that is this time is limited. That's
Yeah,
that's the
you
only
have
downside.
right. You
Yeah.
have a limited opportunity or a limited window, and that was part of my success story. Is run up the
Mm,
bridge. Do not walk, because the
yep.
opportunity to get this far is a fleeting thing,
Yep.
given
Yep.
the vagaries of the physical universe and man with a reactive mind and what could and has happened in the past. So it's very
Yep.
important to understand. Uh, it's this sort of thing doesn't come often, and getting auditing is very very much a part of that.
Sometimes I think Scientology as well. Um, like if I was to say compare, past religions to a very, very modern religion. It's not even 100 years old yet. It's written in a language we actually understand. It's been carefully constructed through gradients. Even me doing the Purif, if I was to relate the Purif as a gradient versus all of Scientology's tech working on a gradient, it blows my mind at how it was worked out. Something so physical has its own gradient as well as mental.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way the two correlate, it freaks me out how this was created.
Mm-hmm.
It just boggles my mind, the
Yeah,
creation of this.
I feel the same way about the entire grade chart.
It's full on, but because I do enjoy studying other religions and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's there's a lot that's not dissimilar as far as a spiritual path goes, but they're written in different languages, they're written in different times, and let's be honest, there's no doubt in my mind Ron Hubbard explored the Bible. He probably even explored psychedelics. And it wouldn't surprise me if he did them and then realized there's a better way.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I can't
it
see how he
wouldn't
couldn't.
surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like how could he know what he knows to not go through that?
Right.
Um, how could he not pick up a Bible? Like the man was just incredibly curious. And then he ended up coming to his own realizations, creating a system that's teachable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the
It's
big thing.
teachable in a
Yeah.
language. Yeah, it's teachable in a current language that we understand as opposed to, an interpreted book. Because the Bible is not a religion. It's what you do with that book that makes it a religion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a formula in there, but the downside to that is that's what quite a few hundred years old in English. That's a few hundred years old. Not less than a century old.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no wonder that a lot of the interpretation around the Bible gets fought about all the time. I mean, they employ scholars to try and, work out what these words mean so we can understand it in a modern society. And then Ron Hubbard comes along and he's like, well, here it is. Here's the recipe in plain English. There's no confusion about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very
You do
clearly
this, 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 this,
delineated.
this, and this.
You get this.
You'll get that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Really simple.
I do believe it comes from a place of knowingness because, I mean, yes, I've seen similar stuff just like you, Artie, in things outside of Scientology. I mean,
Mm.
there are some things with
They're very similar, aren't
yeah,
they?
yeah.
Like
The
there's a
the
lot of
Brahma,
similarities.
Vedas, Hermeticism,
Yes,
even the
yes,
Bible,
yes.
like all around. And I don't think that it was a case of, like these people, they say, oh, well, other people thought of it first and it came from them. Okay, sure. They
Who cares?
because they had the same experiences spiritually as what Aaron Hubbard did. That's my and even if it wasn't him, he did studies on people who had those similar experiences.
Yeah.
Because this is why I say there is a connection between us. Not saying all one with the universe, but maybe all one with God or
Yes, yes.
conscientiousness, because we're all basically good beings. We share something, so therefore there is a sort of a pattern thinking, or rather, I mean, aberration. The word aberration itself implies that when you stray from something,
Mm-hmm.
there's,
Mm,
so in that light, you can use the opposite and say, if you stick to a line, there's going to be certain rules and laws that apply. So therefore, Scientology, therefore the Vedas, therefore Christianity,
that's
etc.,
right.
etc.
Yeah.
What I realized the other day, sorry, I'm
No, that's right.
just
Go
going to
ahead.
share this one thing. Because you're stuck in the sauna for hours and hours. Of course, I'm going to be thinking about stuff.
Yeah, what else are you gonna
Um,
do?
yeah, that's right. But I actually realized there's only one thing that Ron Hubbard really did, and he did it really well. And that was just create a formula. Because
Mm-hmm.
that formula that he created is in all his works, all of it. And
Yeah.
it's a simple recipe,
Mm-hmm.
a really simple recipe. Um, and that gradient, he's taught us how to work at a gradient. There's a recipe right there. Start from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, if you cause this to happen, that will happen as an effect. There's a recipe right there.
Right.
If you sit still, you'll find clarity. and you'll find yourself. There's a recipe right there.
Right.
You know, if you confront yourself, there's a recipe right there. And they all follow the same things, because even for auditing, it needs to start off at a gradient too, before you get to the real deep stuff that people can't confront. But at a gradient, eventually they will confront it, because
Mhm.
now they know it's safe. They have a bit of reality around it.
They have certainty.
You know, back to the study tech, there's mass now. So now they can say, hey, you know, this Scientology stuff isn't as bad as I heard, because now they've got mass around it. Again, off a gradient. So his recipe goes through everything. The bridge, it's a gradient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All of it. The whole lot is a gradient. And it just cycles over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And that gradient is what lets you know. So that creation, just a gradient, you know, is his greatest gift, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
I just want to say something. I'm gonna be a bit of an a-hole here, but I find it so
Sure.
amazing when I observe the people that have said to me that his stuff is mostly just common knowledge. I feel like asking them, well then,
Oh,
and
give me a break.
I feel like asking them, well, why then is your life in such a state? Because most of the people that
Mm,
ask that question have been in such a state that I could say that I could make that statement or ask that question. I haven't, because
yeah.
quantum beingness, all of that. But it's just like, well, if it's such common sense, why is your life fucked up? I'm sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and
And it's
that is
true. It's
that
very true.
is not having a conceptual understanding of it, therefore not having any certainty on it. You know, it's one thing. You know, you
Yeah.
have people that they give you advice that they yet themselves don't partake in or
Yeah.
follow
Yeah.
through with.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the
Yeah.
problem there is you have to. It is an applied religious philosophy. It
Yeah.
isn't just a philosophy.
Isn't it amazing that we're dealing with a subject that removes the reactive mind, and wait for it, our reactive minds are being used against us in order to stay away from the subject, like with mass media creating all this fear around the subject, etc., etc. It's
Yeah, that's
It's
a
pretty
podcast in
clever.
and of itself.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
extremely, extremely clever.
It's
The
it's.
minds that,
Go ahead.
like, if we consider how much we're groomed, right? Um, you know, we're so groomed, we don't even know we're groomed.
oh,
Like,
absolutely.
it's
George Orwell's
incredible,
1984,
incredible.
1884, 1984. Yeah,
1984. Mhm.
That book is happening right now,
yeah,
Yeah,
right now.
yeah,
We're in it. You know who else you should check out is Mark Twain as well.
yeah.
yeah,
That man is yeah, he's just, I don't know, he's up there for me. Him and Tesla are like way up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
way up.
and they were
Yeah,
peers. They
they
were
were
peers.
mates. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they were they were the
It's
only two that could relate with each other. Go figure.
yeah, yeah. ARC is a powerful thing. So
Mm,
it's one of those things where uh you have to have some certainty in order to apply it, and the only way you get certainty is by doing something with it. If you just sit and
yes.
observe and you watch others do things with others, then you yourself have no certainty.
Yep.
So, well, I'm going to get this edited, and I think I'll turn it into part one and part two. It's after 12 o'clock here
Maybe
and
even
after
part
8 o'clock
three.
there. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
8:12 p.m. in Australia. So this has
Yes.
been
Yes.
a whole lot of fun, and even more than I thought it would be. And I think both of you guys
I was
would
really
would
looking
agree.
forward to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've been
yeah,
looking
because
forward to
it
it
opens up a lot of
since we
this.
come up with the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope our listeners have enjoyed it, and if nothing else, it should be food for thought for you to take in the information and apply it and look into it more. If it isn't fun, it isn't Scientology, independent Scientology. And thank you for listening. And we will be doing another podcast probably tomorrow. And we'll see you then. Namaste. And we love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.